Hey my students, how you doing? Hope you having good day. In this video, I am gonna talk about my student DEKU. What if DEKU had inventor's quirk? Part 1. And subscribe for more, also like this video, that will be awesome, helps me to stay motivated. And thanks to the author of this story, this video is possible. So do check it out and show some love. Name of this fanfic is Junkyard Support by LESTAT 719. So do check out the author of this story and check out entire work. Also if you have any complaints about videos, feel free to comment, I will try to improve them. Let's jump in video. Inko Midoriya sat back and was confused, relieved in some sense, but it was the confusion that reigned supreme. This was not what she was expecting, she always knew her son was bright, not to mention curious. He loved taking things apart, but he always put them back together, and 9 times out of 10, it worked better afterward. There was that one time with the toaster, but they didn't talk about that. She had expected his quirk to be something like hers or his father's, attraction and fire breath. Maybe some hybrid of both, not whatever the doctor explained to her. Mrs. Midoriya, he snapped his fingers to bring her attention back to him. Your son can visually perceive mechanical energy in action. I believe this unique power enables him to instantly recognize the potential and functional uses of any machine or technological device in his visual range. Inko stared at the doctor, seeming more confused. He knows what any machine he looks at does and how it functions. He leaned forward, steepling his hands under his chin, his bushy mustache twitching in excitement. He can be the greatest inventor of the quirk era. Inko looked at her son, who was sitting playing with his All Might figure. Does this mean I can't be a hero? You could, but Inko paused. You could design things to help every hero in the world, you can make the world better. I could still save people. His words came out slowly. But more people? Yes, Inko said, maybe a little too quickly, but Izuku was 4, he didn't catch on. You could save so many more people and heroes as well. Izuku seemed to be in deep contemplation about the whole situation. Inko felt terrible, but she was very protective of Izuku and didn't want him to get hurt, so if he was in a workshop creating things, what could go wrong? The god of fate began to laugh maniacally, plots were hatched, and the unforeseen was ready to be put into motion. How dare she call him out? She would mock him. An unforeseen smack up the back of his head made him turn first in anger. There before him was his wife, the goddess of love. An immediate kibosh was put on anything evil or sinister. Instead, a new plan was put into motion. She reached and distributed 3 marks, and with a smile, she kissed her husband's forehead to soothe the pain she had caused him. Inko suddenly felt hopeful for a future where she had many grandkids, not knowing why she felt this way, she dismissed it as just a passing fancy. Do you have any suggestions, doctor? Yes, mechanical, electrical, fabrication, blueprints, anything you can get into his hands and into that brain of his, is going to do nothing but benefit him. The doctor's mustache was still twitching. Yes, let him create. Inko nodded, taking her smiling little boy's hand, she led him from the office. Mom, since I got my quirk, can we have Katsudon? He asked. Of course, anything for my little inventor. The next day. So, what lame quirk did you get? Kachin or Kitsuki Bakugo asked his friend classmate. Something about mechanical energy, I haven't thought of a name for it. Izuku replied as he wondered what he should call his quirk. That doesn't sound like something you can be a hero with. The boy with the quirk explosion pointed out. His quirk was perfect for being a hero, he could blow up the villains without a problem. No, my mom says I am going to be an inventor, that I can make stuff to save heroes and everyone and stuff, Izuku replied, holding his arms wide. I can save more people that way, she says. Yay, how? Kachin put his hands on his hips. How would your lame quirk help me? Izuku thought for a moment, how could he help Kachin? Maybe help him make bigger explosions, he likes to make bigger explosions. Kachin's quirk used his sweat, the more sweat, the bigger the explosion. So he just needed something to collect it. The image began to form in his head, and as everything came together, Izuku felt like he could make the item if he had the stuff. Gauntlets, he said. Kachin looked at him, confused. Izuku grabbed a stick and made a crude drawing of a hand with a big OLA grenade around it. You can store your sweat in the gauntlet. There can be chambers so you can store up for a super mega explosion or just a super one, and we can put a pin that releases the sweat like a real grenade. That would be super cool. Kachin said as he was thinking over what Izuku said. A super mega explosion sounded great. Can you make them? Not now, but if I get the stuff one day, I can. Izuku said with a smile. And I can make something for your ears, so maybe they won't hurt when you make the super mega explosion. Kachin's ears sometimes hurt from the explosions. Okay then, you make my stuff and I will be the best hero ever. Even better than All Might. No one is better than All Might. Izuku stated the undisputed fact. You just watch DEKU. I will be. Kachin said, striking his best All Might pose. No more Deku. I have a quirk, I won't make your stuff if you call me Deku. Izuku turned his back on Kachin. Kachin wanted to protest, but he wanted those gauntlets fine, no more Deku. But you better make me those hand things. Home. Hisashi, that is what the doctor said, how dare you. Fine, you want a paternity test, you can have one. Inko slammed the phone down. I wonder why I married that man. Inko took a deep breath, she needed to calm down. She was looking at possible schools for Izuku to attend when he got a little older that would specialize in the kind of thing he would be doing, and they weren't the most expensive things she had ever seen, but it wasn't going to be cheap. They said he would need a workshop and couldn't have that living in an apartment. They were going to need a house, something that had a shutter garage he could work in. I wonder if inventors make any money? She mused, then laughed. It was not like her little Izuku would make something that would change the world anytime soon, he was 4. The god of fate giggled into his hands before his wife would notice he just gave things a little push. That would teach this mortal to mock him. Izuku. Izuku was lost, he wasn't sure how he got lost, but he was lost. He didn't know where to go or what to do, so he started to cry. He was, after all, just 4 years old and all around him were broken things, cars, and pieces of things, like washing machines. He was looking at the broken things trying to calm down, thinking of how he fixed them, or maybe make a better one. Thinking about that kind of stuff made him calm down. The washing machines caught his attention, he wondered how he could make it better, maybe he could make a washing machine that washed and dried clothes so you didn't have to put them lying outside. It would save so much time. He stopped crying. He started looking at the broken machines, slowly, he walked over to a broken washing machine, he could do it, he would need to take this piece from here, maybe a piece from there. What are you doing? A voice rang out, making him jump. He spun around, ready to scream for his life. Instead, he saw a girl his age, she was a relatively short girl with salmon pink shoulder-length hair styled into thick dreadlocks and swept to her right side. Her eyes are wide and sloped upwards, with notably long upper eyelashes. The irises are green-yellow with a cross in the center, giving them the appearance of scope lenses. A pair of goggles sat on her head, she wore overalls and a t-shirt. Then nothing, I got lost and I was scared, but then I was looking at this washing machine and wondering if I could make something. Maybe a machine to wash and dry the clothes at the same time, kind of stupid, he looked down. No, that is kind of cool, it would be cooler if it had laser guns and maybe a rocket launcher. She moved closer to him. But it's a washing machine. He was baffled. Yeah, but it could also like defend the house in case someone comes in to rob the place. Wouldn't you wish your washing machine could fight? She was even closer now. Nobody would expect it. I mean, keeping your home safe is important, he kept looking at her. He tried to look away, but he couldn't see anything. Her eyes were mesmerizing, and he noticed she was also staring at him until he looked away. I win. She proclaimed. Wait, win? Yeah, we were having a staring contest, and I won. She put her hands on her hips. Undefeated grand champion of the world. But. He began to protest. Nope, it's done. You can only challenge the champ once a day, then the rules, she proclaimed, looking at the washing machine. Where do you live? Izuku recited his address. Nope, I have no idea where that is, but I am sure my dad does. He knows where everything is. She grabbed his hand and began to tug him along. Wait, I don't even know your name. She was surprisingly strong. Oh, I may. She didn't look back or stop moving. Izuku, he managed as she led him through this maze of parts and broken things, past piles of all kinds of stuff. He knew it all, though, what it did, how to fix it. He could do a lot here till they came around a hill of televisions and he saw the lights of a house. As they got closer, a woman with the same hairstyle but red stood in the doorway. May, what did you find now? The woman called as she wiped her hands on an apron. He was lost and wanted to play with the washing machines. He says he can make one that washes and dries like those fancy ones on TV. I asked him where he lives, but I have no idea where that is, so I was bringing him to Daddy. May said with a hint of pride in her voice. That is a good idea, why don't you take him to your daddy then? The woman smiled at Izuku. Don't worry, young man. Her father may look big and scary, but he is a teddy bear. Izuku just nodded as he was pulled along again. Now May's father looked nothing like a teddy bear, the man was a giant and as wide as the door frame. Izuku watched him turn sideways to get past a door, he wore a pair of overalls like his daughter, his voice as deep and booming. Who are you? And what are you doing with my little May? He bellowed. He did not intend to yell, but as something had just blown up, his ears were still ringing and he couldn't hear right, so he wasn't even aware he was yelling. Izuku's bottom lip began to tremble. He had never been yelled at before, except for the time with the toaster, but he would rather forget that. I am sorry, sir. He began to panic. I got lost somehow and ended up by the washing machines, and I just want to go home, but I am lost." Tears started to form in the corners of his eyes, gaining in size rapidly as her father began to panic. "And May pulled me over here. And she said you could help me get home." Tears began to fall. "I just want to go home to my mom. Please don't eat me." May hugged Izuku tight, looking at her. "Dad, you can't eat him, Dad." "Why would I eat him?" Her father was confused and getting flustered at the boy crying and the look his daughter was giving him. "He is going to eat me," Izuku yelled. "I won't let him eat you." May grabbed him and started to run. "I don't want to be eaten," he followed after her. "I am not going to eat him. Why would I eat him? Does he even taste good?" Her father was not helping the situation. "He wants to know how I taste." May. They blindly ran right into her mother. "What is going on?" she yelled. "Dad wants to eat Izuku. He wants to eat me. I do not." It took her 10 minutes to calm everything down and convince her daughter and this poor boy that he would not be eaten and that they would walk him home this very second. Inko was outside her apartment building, looking up and down the street frantically, hoping to catch any sight of her darling little boy. He was late coming home from school. He was never late. She didn't expect to see a tow truck pull up with the words Hatsum Towing, Reking, and Repair. When the door opened, a woman with red dreadlocks stepped out and helped her son out the back. Izuku ran over and wrapped his arms around her legs. "Your son seemed to get somehow lost in our salvage yard," the woman said quickly. "My little girl found him, and after a small misunderstanding with my husband, we brought him home to you." "Small misunderstanding?" Inko tilted her head to the side. She said as the driver's side was open and a massive specimen of a man walked around the truck. "I am very sorry, ma'am. I may have scared your son." And things escalated until my better half could make sense of everything and calm him down. He extended an extra large skillet known as his hand. "I'm Daiki and my wife Hana." Inko shook his hand. He was very gentle. "May, come say hello." The little girl about Izuku's age said, "Hello. My name is May Hatsum. It is very nice to meet you. Bo." Inko smiled as the girl very carefully said each word and said the word Bo before she bowed. Hana stepped forward and handed Inko a card. "This may be a little forward, but our daughter and your son got along well today. I would very much like to arrange a play date for them." Inko smiled, taking the card. "I will call you later. Thank you so much for caring for Izuku and bringing him home safe." She watched as the strange family climbed back into the tow truck. She couldn't help but think how cute it was when Izuku and May waved to each other. Once they were out of sight, she got the long story from her son. He was 4 years old, after all. They ended up having a play date the following week. Then, a play date the following week, the week after, and so forth. Soon, Izuku was coming by the junkyard every day. He and May would explore the junkyard as they would talk about all the beautiful things they would build and how they revolutionized the support industry. Not they were children, they spoke of building fantastical things they saw on television in their cartoons. Robots were at the top of the list, big ones, and maybe even ones that transformed. Of course, mecha and power suits were just a little behind. For crayon plans, they were very detailed. The two children's bond grew, drawing the parents together as their children wanted to spend every moment together. In truth, it allowed the mothers to pool resources together to enrich their children's lives and their thirst for knowledge. Inko had never been so grateful for her son getting lost and meeting the Hatsums. They were such friendly people. Daiki and Hana were just good, they cared for and loved their daughter, and what was important to her became important to them. Izuku had become just that. After Inko submitted the proof to her husband that he was, in fact, Izuku's father, he quietly accepted a permanent post in America, and the two separated. It had become apparent that the two wanted different things, and the fact that he doubted Inko so much to ask for a paternity test was the final straw for both of them. It was simple, as Izuku did not know his father. He only had very fleeting memories of him, so his continuing to be gone was not something that he thought of. It was Daiki who told Inko about the house next to the yard that had come up for sale. It was run down and in need of a lot of repairs, a definite fixer-upper. Inko looked at it and in her mind, she saw its potential. And with Daiki and Hana's offer to help her renovate with some sweat equity, she moved on it. The apartment sale was simple enough and the Hatsum even allowed Inko and Izuku to move in while they started the renovation. He heard his mom and May's mom talking about the trouble of doing laundry and hanging, drying, and folding it. While the use of dryers had increased over time, it was still not commonplace. Izuku was thinking about it when the idea came to him. He and May went to work every day after school. They would head out into the junkyard, looking for pieces and scavenging for what they needed. They would talk about it at night after dinner, even when they bathed. May never liked baths, but would consent to them much more readily if Izuku dragged her to the bath. They were children, so the parents didn't mind. It was a case of one positively influencing the other. Izuku ensured Mei cared for herself and helped him find his voice about what he wanted and liked. Nothing overly rebellious or anything of the sort, but he learned a mighty word. No. He could say no to things, and it was okay, and if the kids in his class didn't like that, then he didn't have to be their friend. It was easier once he and Mei started attending the same school when Izuku moved in. For you see, in a society that revolved around quirks to such an extent, there were more specialized schools for the more support-based ones. While they didn't allow quirk training, some schools would start teaching about mechanical fields much sooner. Some schools catered to those with intelligence-enhancing quirks, etc. When Inko talked about him changing schools, she had expected him to protest, but she had to say that Mei was going to the same school, and he jumped at the chance. She had to sit and talk with him to find out he didn't have friends at his school. There was Kaken, but they didn't play with him since he wouldn't be a hero. Inko kept her twinge of sadness to herself, knowing that she convinced him he could save more people, creating things that had put him in that situation. When he told Kitsuki, the boy said not to forget his arm things. For Izuku, he had a best friend, an absolute best friend who wanted to do the same stuff he did, and their quirks worked well together. With Mei's Zoom quirk, she could help find and place the tiny gears that Izuku needed for their invention. The most challenging part of the project they were working on was the solar bulb. However, after seeing some broken solar panels, the invention was improved by cost-cutting power and still providing the UV light that most people felt made their clothes cleaner and more sanitary, which came from hanging the clothes outside to dry. Then they had to hook it up, they hadn't thought about how to move it, and that was where Daiki came in. He had been watching the children sneak off, and of course, he followed and monitored them. When he saw them start building something, he thought it was cute, then he saw it coming together and questioned if it would work. He was addicted to watching them work together. When he saw them borrow some wet laundry, he followed and watched. Of course, the first time, it didn't work, but Izuku smiled and told Mei it was an easy fix, and sure enough, Mei got in there and fixed it super quick. The second time, it worked, and the laundry came out folded and dried. Izuku? Mei asked, staring at their success. Yes, Mei, he responded with a sense of shock and awe that it worked. How will we attach it to the washing machine? She asked quietly. We need to cut a hole in the washing machine. How we aren't allowed to use the snippers, Dad said. I hadn't thought about that, he sounded defeated. Then how about I help, Daiki said, stepping out. The kids, of course, jumped, worried they were in trouble, but they could tell from the look on the man's face that they were not in trouble. So, phase 2 began, designing a new washing machine to work with their invention. With Daiki's help, they soon became a little band of creators working every day on the creation of the machine. With an adult there, it helped as he could ask the questions children didn't think of, such as function, aesthetic, and everything else, water sealing the basics. It took a year before they were done. Daiki stood there and was amazed at how it had all come together. The washing machine would sit on top of the dryer folder, and after the wash was done, it would drop into the machine and be dried and folded. Daiki knew that his little girl was special, but Izuku, to not only conceive of this, but build one out of junk was beyond his comprehension. He did the best thing he could think of. He took all of Izuku's designs and sat down with the boy and redrew them in a professional blueprint, and then they took it down to get it patented and registered with the patent office. Of course, they demonstrated the whole thing for Inko and Hana, who were blown away even when they took the laundry. It had the faint odor of the outside. The women were already offering their suggestions for V2 with all the things Daiki didn't think of, and of course, there were no consequences to the children. Izuku, could you make them bigger? Inko asked. Like how big? The little boy asked. Big enough for an industrial washing machine? Inko asked, her finger near her mouth. Daiki and Hana looked at her questioningly. Hotels, hospitals, retirement centers, they all use massive commercial washers and dryers. Now, if they could be folded automatically, it would free up so much time for the laundry person. I don't see why not, he said, looking up at her. Do you want me to make one? If you could. Okay, mommy. He smiled. The first offer for his invention came about 2 months after the patent was filed. They held out, the offers came in rather quickly, and they soon sold the rights to the Aoi Rozu Corporation for a life-changing sum. The Hatsums and Inko couldn't believe what was happening. We should start a company for the kids to work under. Hana said, staring at the check with an ungodly number of zeros. That way, we can put money away under it for them. What would we call it? Inko, staring at the same check. How about junkyard support? Daiki said. The kids walked in very dirty from outside. What's junkyard support, Daddy? Mei asked as they were standing in front of the washing machine, stripping out of their clothing. We were thinking that could be your guy's invention company. He replied. Izuku smiled. It's funny since we got all the parts from the junkyard. I like it. Works for me, Mei said. The parents just started chuckling as the two children were standing there naked like it was nothing. "We are going to go take our bath before dinner." They just walked down the hall. "Would you mind if our children got married one day?" Hana asked Inko. "I think I can support that." Inko's face broadened into a significant smile. That was how it started, with a clothes folder and dryer. May started calling their creations their babies. It was all Hana's fault. She had offhandedly referred to their projects as their precious babies due to the care they were putting in, and her daughter just latched onto it. Izuku protested, but soon he was doing the same thing. Her father may have fainted when he heard his daughter ask her friend if he wanted to make a baby with her. May was either at Izuku's or her house. Most of the time, they were at her place, as she had the junkyard they could raid for their inventions. It was routine. They would come home, do homework, and work on whatever project they fancied. Often, it was spent huddled over a notebook, thinking of support gear for whatever new hero had just come on the scene. The first explosion happened when they were 8. May and Izuku came stumbling out of the workshop covered in soot and coughing. The answer had been simple. It was designed to blow up. It worked too well. The inventing became increasingly their lives as May and Izuku were obsessed with building and creating. Thankfully, Inko and Hana were right there to rein them in. They had only snuck out of bed once to keep working for the mothers to ground them from inventing, and each other for a week for that to never happen again. Skip a meal, and they would face the same punishment. It was an effective tool. The problem, or the wonderful thing about two intelligent, creative children, is that one could figure out how to make anything. Even if he didn't understand how he did it, he could make things, and then he had no idea how they did it. May wasn't much help in that fashion, as she was so dialed into what they were doing that she wasn't sure how they got there. That was how the capture grenade was created. They didn't know how the substance was made or even how it had all come together. They had to take it apart to figure out how they did it. It was Izuku's quirk. Izuku possesses an innate talent for inventing mechanical devices, further enhanced by his ability to visually perceive mechanical energy in action. This unique power enabled him to instantly recognize the potential and functional uses of any machine or technological device in his visual range. Combined with his and May's natural intelligence and aptitude, this skill allows him to conceive, design, and build highly advanced mechanical devices. He could also operate, modify, and disassemble existing technology or create countermeasures. It's worth noting that Izuku's superhuman talent for invention doesn't necessarily mean that he has a superhuman intellect. Even a genius inventor must consciously work out the theoretical principles behind their inventions and then design them through a series of logical steps. In Izuku's case, however, his subconscious mind works out many of these logical steps, meaning he might be aware of how the invention was created, forcing him to take it apart to figure it out. The capture grenade would burst upon contact with whatever it hit, causing a white foam to explode and harden extremely fast, trapping whoever or whatever it hit. Thankfully, they made something to dissolve it, but couldn't tell you what either substance was made of. After that, video cameras were installed, and they had to record what they were doing as an audio log to revisit it to see how certain things were done. Once again, a patent and check soon followed after it was figured out. This was their lives. The parents took a tiny bit of money, but put the rest away for their children's future when they were 10, May said. "Izuku, let's make a robot." Their destiny was put into motion. As he was prone to do whenever she asked him for something. "Okay, May. How big?" "I think we should make a small one first, like one that can do stuff around the house. Then we can make one that is super cool and can fight and stuff," May said, jumping up and down excitedly. "Okay, May, like clockwork," he responded. At 11, the everyday vocational automaton came online, or EVA. Inko and Hana nearly fainted at the unveiling, and Daiki just sat dumbfounded. "How?" was all he said. "You're going to have to check the tapes." Izuku shrugged. "Why don't you invent a scanner that creates blueprints of what you make?" he said dumbfounded. "I hadn't thought of that," Izuku said sheepishly. "Next project," May said, smiling. "Next project," he said, and they just walked back in, leaving the EVA sitting there. Now, EVA was round, kind of like a trash can, and had arms that extended out, allowing it to do household tasks. It had a computer screen that displayed a set of eyes and a robotic girl-sounding voice. It sounded like an old movie the kids were watching about trash and space robots. The EVA patent was submitted, and once the blueprints were finalized, the kids used it for their final project in school, blowing away the competition. They went on to win the prefecture and then nationals. This earned them a trip to Island, and the two children were over the moon at the thought of going to the center of technological innovation. The announcement that first place at the national would earn the trip got them to submit EVA for competition. Of course, there were a lot of questions about how two children had done such a thing, but thanks to the video, they were able to submit it immediately and shut down accusations of cheating. Inko was sitting down with Daiki and Hana. "I think we should look into making these ourselves." Daiki whistled, that would be a lot of work, how would we even set up a plant to do it? Hana closed her eyes, thinking. This is going to be huge, like a game-changing invention. We are talking about a household robot capable of doing chores and helping around the house. I heard the kids talking about making it look prettier, and then May started saying how it should be able to fly. And I bet without missing a beat, he said. Okay, May, Inko added with a small laugh. You know it, Hana said without missing a beat. I know that it is his quirk that allows these things to be done and the material he has, but it is crazy. Maybe the Aoi Rozu Corporation would want to collaborate more, with the kids getting a percentage off every unit sold. Daiki said, leaning forward. There is going to be a lot of legal questions about these things being made and sold, and we frankly don't have the knowledge or the connections to handle that. We can talk more about it later, we have to get packed for the trip to Island, Hana said, getting up from the table. Island? If there was a definition of paradise, this may have been it for the parents and the children. They stepped off the plane, happy to see a woman holding a sign with their names. The woman's name was Cease, and she was there to take them to the hotel and get them familiar with the itinerary. They would present Eva in the main hall and on the expo floor. It was a 3-day event, giving them 4 days to enjoy the island afterward. The kids were more excited about walking the floor. Izuku was bouncing in his chair with such excitement that it was a concern that he might catch fire. The people of Island didn't know what had been unleashed in their midst. Combined with May's curiosity, the two kids were about to explode. The problem was overload for Izuku, as they found out on the way to the hotel, with all the technology around them, things that didn't exist in Japan, his quirk was filling his head with all information about everything he was seeing. May noticed before anyone else and pulled him away from looking out the window, alerting Inko that he didn't look well. The bloody nose from the overload took them over an hour to calm down. Inko and Hana smiled from the doorway as Izuku lay in bed. May curled up next to him, holding his hands and telling him it would all be okay. They would have to take it slow at the expo. For May Hatsum, Izuku was her best friend and partner, one of the most important people in her life. They were going to revolutionize the world together. Every day was the best because they were together, he had helped stop so many of her babies from blowing up thanks to his quirk. Seeing him hurt bothered her, as nothing could do about it. She drifted off to sleep holding his hands, he had fallen asleep, and out of habit, she had begun to match his breathing, and soon was racing to meet him in dreamland. Izuku woke up feeling much better, he opened his eyes and found them immediately gazing upon the sleeping form of his best friend. May was peacefully asleep, still holding his hands, he slowly extracted his hands with skill as this was not the first time. There was an issue when Izuku and May woke up with a perfectly round sphere in the middle of them with a red button, and neither of them was sure how it got there. When May, unable to control her urges, pushed Izuku to the side, laughing maniacally to press the button, it was pure chaos in the most fun way possible. A small missile-like object launched from the sphere, followed by hundreds more. The explosions of confetti and mini fireworks were excellent and very loud, waking the whole house. As May and Izuku were on the floor looking at everything in awe, a banner suddenly unfolded. Happy birthday May. From Izuku. Izuku wasn't allowed to watch Star Wars for a month the second time. The thermal detonator was still buried somewhere in the junkyard. If he couldn't see, then he couldn't reverse engineer it. A lightsaber was still on the table, they didn't discuss that. So, to stop his night building, May started holding his hands. Her father was not too pleased. The birthday bomb was still pending final review. He sat on the edge of the bed, his feet dangling just above the floor. He rubbed his eyes and yawned, gingerly putting his foot down and standing up. The pain in his head was faint but much more tolerable, he knew he needed to get it under control to avoid another situation like yesterday. As he opened the door to the room, he heard the parents' voices coming from the small living area of the suite. He walked out to see a few trays with food, different juices, and the holy grail of breakfast, chocolate milk and strawberry milk for May. "How are you feeling, sweetie?" his mother asked. "Much better, it only hurts a little bit," his eyes never left the chocolate milk. Daiki walked over and lifted it into the air, Izuku was tracking it with his whole head. Hana and Inko laughed. "Oh, wake up May, and you can have some," he said. Izuku bolted over and jumped onto May, eliciting a grunt. 5 more minutes, she muttered, throwing her arms around Izuku and wrapping her legs around him like a spider monkey. May, strawberry milk," he said. Her eyes bolted open. "Dad says if you get up right now, you get strawberry milk, I saw it. There are like 4 bottles. May Hatsum loved strawberry milk, now she would trip a small child to get to strawberry milk or trap Izuku with a capture weapon. She could also be trapped under a box with a stick holding it up for the stuff. The last one was a proven fact, but should be kept from polite company. "She is up," he yelled, scrambling off the bed to claim his prize. He came out to see May tearing the top off a bottle and guzzling it. He soon did the same, their parents held the other bottles hostage. It wasn't fair, Japan didn't have this brand. Sheilanis Farms had been the most heavenly mixture they had stumbled across. Aside from powder and whipping cream, it is a story not to be discussed in polite society. Once they were done eating breakfast, they got another bottle, made the bed, and took showers, another bottle. They had a system for this one, it saved time if they just took a shower simultaneously. Like a well-oiled machine, they were washing and scrubbing, passing the sponge to get each other's backs. "We are going to have to stop that soon," Hana said to Inko, who nodded. "We should do something about that now," Daiki grumbled. The two kids helped each other dry off and get dressed, they looked the other over and came bolting out of the room, ready for their next bottle. They were on their way to the convention with Izuku hunkered down in the back of the car as they rode in the car towards the convention center. Mei was down there with him, having a detailed conversation about her zoom, how she adjusts it, and how she keeps it from zooming in too far or getting stuck. She was going into great detail for several reasons. It distracted Izuku, and it may help him. She wanted to help him. Once they arrived, he and Mei tested it out, he smiled slightly as he grimaced. It would take some getting used to, but it was a start. Mei took his hand and led him inside so he could look at the ground. Once they arrived at their booth, they assembled their stall. "Eva?" Mei called out, "Come to mama." Eva came right over to Mei. "Yes mother," it responded. "Help grandfather with the setup of the stall," Mei said. "That is new," Inko said to her. "We did some upgrades for the demonstration," Mei just beamed. "She is such a great baby. I want her to fly and look pretty though Izuku." "Yes, Mei," Izuku replied as he grabbed a piece of wood and walked over to Eva and Daiki. "Mama Hana, do you think they have a scrapyard here?" "Probably not, sweetie. I bet they recycle much stuff, but maybe we could find out." "Would you like me to see?" Hana responded, looking at him sweetly. She loved Izuku like he was her own, how he and Mei were was precious. She knew she wanted two of them to marry and make real babies one day. Inko and she had talked about it one night. Daiki protested but saw her husband melt when Izuku called him dad for the first time. Hana moved off to explore as the rest of the group kept working. Inko was more of a supervisor, Mei was the foreman, and Izuku, Daiki, and Eva were the laborers. Inko kept her comments to herself as Izuku and Mei shared a water bottle like it was nothing. She wondered how much longer this innocence between them would last. Hana came running back with Izuku, they grabbed a bin and ran off with Eva in tow. When they returned, their bin was full of small parts and this shiny, bendable white metal. Mei squealed, "Can we do it? I think we can redo her body and I can make her hover but not fly yet." "Not with these parts, and her arms are far off, too," Izuku said. "Good enough for me," Mei exclaimed. "Where did you find this stuff?" Daiki said to his wife. "Dumpster in the back, recycling dumpster, but the same thing," Hana said with a grin. "We may not have all the fancy stuff, but our kids know how to make it from what they got." Once the booth was set up, they watched the kids go to work, they would rope in the adults occasionally. Inko used her attraction to help pull and shape Eva's new body. Daiki was called to punch through the seams so they could be secured in place. Hana was having fun working with her daughter, who had the same quirk. Usually, it was just the kids, but they wanted to involve the parents this time. Watching the kids work was so fascinating to behold, they were off in their world, using words that no one knew or gestures, the other would react or grab what the other needed. The exhibit had opened, but the kids didn't notice as they kept working away on Eva. They would step back. Izuku would look something over and say what seemed like nonsense to Mei, who would nod and do the precision work. They didn't even notice the crowd gathered to watch them work. Hana and Inko had expected to hear some cutting remarks from those watching, but instead, they were all theorizing and talking about what the kids were doing. The ladies listened to the word primitive, which raised their hackles, but she heard others talking about what these kids could do with a proper facility. One little girl about Mei and Izuku's age, blonde, was at the front and mesmerized by what was happening. They even heard the girl say something, and Mei or Izuku nodded and did what she suggested. Izuku wiped some sweat from his brow and stepped back, Mei did the same, she looked at him with pleading eyes, waiting for him to give her the okay. When he nodded, Mei gave to command. "Time to wake up, Eva." With the command, Eva now resembled her cartoon counterpart more. She was slick white metal that tapered to a point, and spider-like legs held her in place as her display screen came on. The whole unit was one piece, so there was no floating head, but as Eva woke up, the legs retracted, and it was there floating. It maneuvered around the stall, some getting its bearings to the crowd's oohs and ahs. That caught the kids' attention as they finally noticed they were not alone. The blonde girl stepped up and asked Izuku and Mei questions, it became this rapid-fire exchange. When the adults started asking questions, that was when the kids shrank back some, so the adult stepped in to promote the demonstration in Auditorium B. Izuku was the first to realize that he didn't know her name. "I am Izuku Midoriya, and this is Mei Hatsum, what is your name?" I am sorry, the girl giggled and stuck out her hand. Melissa Shield, pleased to meet you. Are you an inventor as well? May said, jumping forward, I like your hair color, it is beautiful. Thank you, I like your guys as well, Melissa said, yes, I made a collapsible mechanical pogo stick. She pulled out a stick that was about 2½ inches round and about 2 feet long. I want to make it even smaller, but I haven't figured it out yet. Melissa tapped a button and it sprang to life about the size of her. It has an internal stabilizer making it harder for you to fall, and the mechanism in the base helps store and transmit the kinetic energy when you jump, allowing it to do 75% of the work for you. Melissa beamed. That is so cool, Izuku and May both exclaimed, looking as Melissa bounced around. I never knew that microchambers with that material would be able to store energy like that, Izuku said, making Melissa stop. How did you know that? She said. Sorry, my quirk, I can see the mechanical energy and how it flows and distributes, it also tells me how a machine works, he said sheepishly. You mean you can tell me how any machine works just by looking at it? She said in wonder. Izuku nodded, glad she wasn't mad at him, and it tells me how to counter it. What does your quirk do? Melissa looked sad, I don't have a quirk. She had been hoping to avoid the topic. Some people treated her differently when they found out she didn't have a quirk. It was not as bad as some other places, Island was a different kind of place. And the father has shepherded her from most of the bad parts. That is so cool, May said. That is what I love about making babies, if you put your mind to it, anyone can do it and make some amazing stuff. May pointed to her eyes, zoom lets me zoom in, nothing all that special. It helps with precision work, but you know. I think it's amazing as well, Melissa, Izuku said. Do you want to walk around with us? Melissa nodded, after May and Izuku got permission, they walked off with Melissa, who volunteered to show them around the convention. Melissa was curious, though, when the women told Izuku to go slow and not to strain himself, but she waited till they were out of earshot. What did they mean about not straining yourself, she asked. My quirk will automatically tell me all the information about any mechanical device I see, Izuku said. And there are so many awesome and new things on Island that it overloaded me yesterday when we arrived. So I told him how I keep my zoom quirk from automatically zooming in or getting stuck on zoom, May said, it helps some, but it is still a work in progress. Is your dad like David Shield of Shield Industries? Izuku asked. Melissa nodded. She wondered how they would react to that news. That is so cool. Did he make all of All Might's costumes and gear for a while? Did you ever get to meet All Might? Melissa smiled, I have met him a bunch of times, when I was little, I didn't really know who he was, but I started calling him Uncle Might and it just stuck. That is so cool. May said. I would love to meet him. Melissa smiled as Izuku nodded his head enthusiastically. The trio smiled and started talking about the differences between their lives. May and Izuku were so jealous when they discovered she had her lab. She invited them to check it out sometime. Melissa was floored when she heard that everything they invented and had made, even Eva, was from May's family business. They had upgraded the robot with just spare parts from the recycling bin. Finding out that they had already created things and sold the patents was astonishing to her, it lit a competitive fire in her. All this available material surrounded her, and she was making pogo sticks. Next year, she would make something to blow their socks off. May would lead Izuku by the hand, with him putting his head down some when it started to overwhelm him, cutting it off before it got too bad. Melissa and May would describe the invention to him so he could decide if he wanted to look it over himself. It wasn't too soon that Melissa led him around when May saw something she wanted to look at more. Melissa was a little self-conscious when May just passed Izuku's hand. She had never held hands with a boy except her dad and uncle, but they didn't count. She found that she enjoyed it and that talking with Izuku was easy. Melissa wasn't surprised about them wanting to go into making support gear, not with what they were already doing. The talk of the UA interested her, she knew that was where her uncle had gone and graduated. Their support course was well respected worldwide, a few of the inventors and scientists that her father employed had come from the UA. They were sitting down, having just enjoyed a hot dog. May had excused herself to go to the bathroom. A question had been building up in Melissa, the more she heard about Izuku's quirk, the more she began to wonder. Izuku, do you think there could ever be a quirkless hero? Melissa said hesitantly. I think anyone could be a hero, a quirkless hero would have to work harder at it, he responded quickly. They would have to rely on gadgets, I would love to work with someone like that. I want to be a hero, Melissa said. Having grown up watching my uncle and all the great things he had done, I want to do that also. I want to be a hero. I think that is amazing, Melissa, Izuku smiled at her. I wanted to be a hero also, but I can help people more with my inventions, that's what my mom told me. Would you help me? Melissa blurted out suddenly. She wanted to retract it, but with Izuku, it was possible, she expected him to laugh or say something sarcastic, maybe even mock her. Of course I would, he said quickly. Anything for my new friend. Friend? She muttered. You want to be friends. Even though. But you are quirkless. Of course, why would that matter? It is someone's heart that makes the difference. Sure, a quirk helps, but if you work hard enough and have the right support, you can do anything. I will support you, Melissa, and I am sure May will, too. After all, we are junkyard support. He smiled, and it pierced her heart. She heard he believed in her and was willing to help her achieve her goal. It didn't sound like a platitude or that he was humoring her. The way he talked filled her heart with joy. Impulsively, she hugged him before jumping back, blushing some. You need to start working out, though, he said, as he blushed as well from the sudden hug. You will need to train your body and mind. You're right. I won't let you down, Melissa said, smiling. What are we doing? May said as she walked back. Melissa wants to be a quirkless hero, and we will help design her gear. Izuku said, smiling. Oh, we are going to make so many babies together. May said excitedly. Melissa blushed, babies. I don't know if I am ready for that. I mean, is that necessary? We are all so young. Izuku didn't quite understand the outburst from their new friend, but when he explained that was what May called their inventions, it seemed to calm their blonde friend down. For the rest of the trip, they were inseparable. The demonstration went off without a hitch. Eva performed great. Some of the adults in the room seemed to take it personally that two kids were up there presenting and, during the question section, came at the children hard, trying to prove them as frauds. Though the mothers were memorizing names and faces for revenge, DEKU put his hand on the kids' shoulders and whispered words of encouragement. May had no problem speaking up and defending their work. Izuku was nervous, and responding to angry adults took him a bit. DEKU noticed that Izuku found his voice after one person attacked May, and then Izuku jumped in to defend her. After the demonstration, there were private meetings with different companies and some of the corporations on the island. They talked more to the children about their process, schooling, and what they hoped to accomplish. They were scouting the children for the future. That was what the parents thought until one company shocked them. His name was Dr. Francis Baker, the head of the support division for Omni Support. The man was about average height, with green and gold eyes resembling circuit boards. I would like to extend an offer for you to move here to Island, he said, opening a briefcase. We will enroll you here on the island in our technical course at the Future Academy. I can assure you that you will find no better curriculum. We will give you your lab to create anything you want. Room and board and plane tickets so you may travel home for the holidays. Like a boarding school? Inko asked. Yes, your child will be properly looked after and cared for, the man said smugly. This is a wonderful opportunity. Wait, her child. Hana said. Are you only extending this offer to Izuku? Well, yes. The man responded as if that was extremely clear. Izuku had the talent and quirk to be able to create anything. Well, I am sure that your daughter is talented. I feel we would be better to take a wait-and-see approach. To see if she can grow and develop independently, independent of Izuku. Hana was about to tell this man off, but DEKU touched her shoulder. Honey, this is an amazing offer for Izuku. It is life-changing. Hana wanted to protest, but instead, she said nothing. May looked heartbroken for a second at the thought of being separated from Izuku, but she understood he was held back by what they had to work with. Inko looked at Izuku. It was precisely what DEKU said, a potentially life-changing opportunity, but before she could even say a word, Izuku spoke up, you want me, but not May. Dr. Francis nodded his head. Then no. I don't want to work with you and reject your offer. Young man, you don't realize how big this opportunity is. He protested. May is more important to me than anything you can offer, Izuku said as he reached out and took May's hand. She understands me, and she has been my friend before she knew what my quirk was and would be my friend even if I didn't. She is smart and extremely talented, she would go on to be a great inventor, even if she never met me. I am happy we get to do it together, so if you can't see that, I don't want to work with you. The man was flabbergasted. When he looked at Inko, she just shrugged, he has made up his mind. DEKU leaned over to Hana and whispered, they have my blessing to get married. At that point, Izuku ignored the man and turned to May, who smiled sweetly at him. I'm happy that I get to change the world with you too. She threw her arms around him and hugged him close. The ache that had built up in her heart melted away. The man from Omni walked out fuming. Is that the last one? Izuku said, hoping the answer was yes, but he saw Hana shake her head and hold up one finger. The door opened, and in walked their final meeting. The man in question is tall with an average build. He has aqua-colored eyes and light brown hair, which is short and messy with two prominent tufts for bangs and a short goatee. He has light wrinkles on his face due to his age. He wears wide-rimmed square glasses, a blue button-up shirt, pale pants, and a dark belt with a metal buckle. His navy sneakers have a red accent and light soles. He wears a dark watch and a wedding ring on his left arm. Mei and Izuku immediately perked up, recognizing David's shield. David warmly shook the hands of the parents, introducing himself with a pleasant smile. "You two have become fast friends with my daughter," he said with a smile. "They are all she has been talking about for the last few days. I know you have been through a lot of these, and from the look of Dr. Francis, I assume he did something insulting, so I will make this quick. I want to offer both children a chance to attend our summer program." Like the man before him, he pulled out an envelope, but unlike the others, he pulled out two. The course will focus on improving all aspects of their invention process, from mechanical engineering to computer programming. Classes will be held in the morning, with lab work scheduled every day after lunch, weekends off, room and board. If you like, I can even have accommodation for you, the parents prepared as well. Mei and Izuku turned to their parents, pleading looks on both their faces. Hana said, "Give us a chance to review the paperwork." "Of course," David responded. In the meantime, Melissa was wondering if the kids could have a sleepover tomorrow night. "I think that would be alright," Inko said with a smirk. Hana smiled at Mei, "That sounds like fun, I have been dying to go for a dip in the hot tub." The trio. Melissa was a ball of nervous energy, she had never had a sleepover. She had only been to two of them, and they didn't go well. But tonight, it was different. She was going to have two actual friends over. She had been researching games and things to do, picked out some movies, and procured snacks. And it was everything she hoped it would be. They stood up late, talking and laughing. They shared stories and started working on ideas for Melissa to be a quirkless hero. She was just so happy when they all finally fell asleep. She was surprised when Izuku lay down with Mei and the girl grabbed his hands. After an explanation, it seemed like the best idea for the night, seeing how they were talking inventions and Izuku would have access to so much stuff where they were. Melissa smiled when they invited her to join them, the feeling of being included was something she had longed for. The rest of the time, there was a blur of the three of them running around the island and just being kids. Melissa was so sad to see them go, but also excited when she found out they were returning for the summer program. They exchanged numbers and emails so they could stay in contact. The island would be lonely without them, but at least she wasn't alone. Home. They slipped right back into the familiar routine of their lives, though they may have been on the phone a lot more. Izuku and Mei hooked up a giant screen in their work area with a camera so Melissa could dial in whenever she wanted. Soon, Melissa had the same thing, and despite the difference, they worked on small projects together. When he turned to Daiki, Izuku was frustrated with the metal he wanted to use for a piece. "Can you teach me how to forge metal?" Daiki thought about it, he had enjoyed doing it in his youth and in fact, he had done so for years after he got married, but now he was just so busy with the business that his shop had turned into a storage unit. It took them 2 days to clean the thing from the clutter. That was how Izuku learned how to reforge metal for their projects. Things began to shift one day just after Mei's 12th birthday when she rather calmly walked in and told the family she was bleeding from her lady parts and her stomach hurt. Hana sprang into action with Inko right on her heels. Their parents became very adamant that she wasn't allowed to take a bath with Izuku anymore. When they did anyway, they were grounded. They were grounded again when they found Izuku holding ice to Mei's chest because she said it was sore. Neither of them knew why. The introduction of the training bra followed shortly after that. Mei was not happy about the medieval torture device she was being forced to wear. Their parents didn't want them sleeping in the same bed anymore. They had Izuku design gauntlets that would keep him from sleep inventing. It was a strange time. Mei and he seemed to be even more aware of each other, they were before, but something about this was different. That summer, they returned to Island with Inko in tow. She only stood with them for a few weeks. She returned home knowing they were safe once she saw that everything was quiet. Melissa was listening to Mei talk and complained about how weird her parents and Inko were being. Melissa tried to explain it to Mei, but Mei said she didn't care about that. Melissa sighed, she didn't understand the massive deal with it either. The two girls changed into swimsuits and headed out of the changing room. Then Melissa saw Izuku without a shirt. For about a year, he had been working with the forge and working out in general. It had been Daiki's suggestion to keep him and Mei separated, but that was not the issue today. "He looks really cute." "Wait, what?" Melissa thought she managed to suppress her eep, though she did turn red. Mei just smiled. She liked seeing him without his shirt, but she was unsure why. Izuku failed to notice anything. Promises. Izuku was focused on the forge, working out a design to fulfill a promise in his mind. He was sitting in his desk chair, spinning in a circle with a pencil curled on his upper lip. He closed his eyes and let his mind drift with the singular focus of fulfilling his promise. Explosives and metal are a dangerous combination. His head was leaned all the way back. When he opened his eyes, Mei was staring down at him. They stood like that till he blinked and her smile slowly spread, still the champ. He sat up and spun to face her. She was wearing her standard overalls, but one of the buckles was undone, leaving it hanging down, revealing her bra to him. She had graduated from a training bra and when it happened, Izuku couldn't have cared less, but the summer they turned 13, he noticed that both Mei and Melissa had breasts. He tried not to stare, but he couldn't stop himself, and when his body reacted in an unexpected way, he fled into the water. It had been difficult, he had woken up, and his voice had decided it couldn't decide on a pitch. It was DEKU who had the pleasure of sitting Izuku down and explaining the changes that were going on and would go on. Izuku was a scientist, an inventor, trial and error, plan, and plans. This newly awakened appendage between his legs did not want to follow any rhyme or reason to its reactions. Seeing Melissa or Mei in a stage of undress or a swimsuit, other women walking around in that same style, people kissing on television, tight clothing, skids fluttering, a stiff freaking breeze, and it seemed to decide that now was a good time for it to stand up and try and draw attention to itself. The worst was when he saw Hana in a bikini at the beach, he stayed in the water for most of the day. Okay, that wasn't the worst, Mei and he had fallen asleep together a few weeks while working on homework. When he woke up, she had done her impression of a spider monkey, but his head was nestled in her developing chest, and his not-so-best friend had decided to wake up and poke into Mei's parts. He felt like he was betraying Mei and her parents, so he did his best to ensure that didn't happen again. The only good thing about all this was that he had gotten slightly taller. So now Mei was staring at him with her bra exposed, he blushed and covered his eyes. Mei. Izuku. She yelled back sarcastically. Cover up. He said. What, they are smaller than Melissa's. She laughed when he protested. With that not being the point, she snapped the other side. They're better now. Mei had unsnapped the other part right as she walked in, she knew it would get him flustered and make him blush. For some reason, knowing that she did that to him made her happy. She wasn't pleased with him for refusing to let her sleep in his room after a scary movie last week, and even when they would spend the summer on Island, he wouldn't. It was all right because Mei could cuddle with Melissa, for some reason, Melissa would protest but always give in the end. What are you working on? And will we finish up waste allocation loader excavation for the convention this year? Mei huffed at him. I want to finish the gauntlets first, then we can finish Wall-E, he said, readjusting how he was sitting. What is the problem? Mei walked over, threw her arms around him from behind, and leaned over his shoulder. He loved and hated it when she did this, the smell of her, mixed with metal and cleaner, made his friend stand up. She saw all the designs for the gauntlets, but she didn't understand them. For some reason, Izuku was laboring over this one. He could have just let his quirk take over and made something, but he refused. Mei looked at the designs, you should combine this one and this one, she said, pointing at two different ones. This one will give it like a revolver type function. The shots can focus his explosion, giving it a more concentrated targeting, and as he gets stronger, maybe even help with armor piercing, then he can open all the chambers by pulling the pin in massive explosion. If you focus on the barrels, it can still be controlled somewhat. Also, the chambers are easy to replace for maintenance if damaged. He tilted his head back and looked at her, you are so smart, but sometimes that big brain gets in the way. Thanks Mei, he just laughed. Now get it done, I want to get dirty and make our baby. Mei yelled out. What? They heard DEKU yell from the outside. Bakugo. He stood there looking at Izuku, they had kept in sporadic contact over the years. He was surprised when he told him the gauntlet design was ready. He saw this lanky green-haired guy walking towards him and recognized him almost immediately. If the messy green hair didn't give him away, the diamond freckles did. He was just a smidge taller than Bakugo, but he knew he would eventually be taller. Bakugo frowned when he noticed Izuku's arms were slightly smaller than his. Yo, don't make me wait all day. Show me what you got. He bellowed. The others at the outdoor cafe looked startled, but he paid them no mind. Izuku apologized to the other patrons as he walked over and pulled out the blueprints. I thought you said this was going to be a grenade. He said. If you don't stop yelling, I will take these and leave. Izuku said. Bakugo instinctively wanted to pound this bastard into oblivion, but it really didn't matter. Izuku was going to support or some stupid shit, this was probably going to be this poor bastard's only claim to fame. Fine, explain this then, he said, pointing at the blueprint. And why didn't you make one for me to practice with? Well, that would be illegal for both of us, and then neither of us would get into the Izuku side. Look, the chambers act like a revolver, as you sweat, it will collect in each chamber, with an automatic cutoff so the chamber doesn't overload. Once the chambers are filled, the backup chambers will then fill. You can fire your blasts like normal, but to fire a chamber, you are going to grab the gauntlet like so, and when you trigger your explosion, it will ignite the chamber, sending out your attack in a more concentrated manner. Great for pinpoint hits and even armor piercing later. Once you fire your 6 shots pull back here, it will eject the spent chambers and quickly load the backups. If you pull this pin, it will release all the stored sweat into this chamber, which will be your huge explosion attack. I think with time, we may even be able to figure a way to focus that attack better as well. Bakugo looked at all, he said I seemed relatively calm, will it work? I am sure I have a computer model designed to email you all the calculations, but if we both get into the UA, once they sign off on it, I can build it myself. But I wanted to keep my promise. Izuku said, getting to his feet. Bakugo reviewed the plan, did you design this yourself? I had a hard time settling in on a design, my friend was the one who helped me cut through the mess and settle in on this one. He said. You mean that weird? Don't you finish that sentence, Bakugo, Izuku's eyes narrowed. Mei is my best friend and someone I care about. Bakugo smiled, the fire when Izuku spoke, the willingness to go to the edge, Bakugo could see it in his old friend. He had changed over the years, not sniveling, not hiding, but ready to throw down if need be. Keep that edge, Izuku, it will help to take you far. Bakugo rolled up the blueprints and walked away. Notes. Thank you to Aquarius for their suggestion for the gauntlets, please keep giving me your suggestions, I love them. Chapter 3. A Night by the Beach. Notes. Okay, so there are some comments about the drama. I am adding this note to just say I promise it won't drag on, and there won't be a lot of it. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Melissa was a bundle of raw energy, she was so excited. Izuku and Mei were going to be landing any minute. This summer was going to be the best, they were going to have a cake and a little party for Mei, who had just turned 16, Izuku's birthday was going to happen on the island, and lastly, she was going to tell them how she felt. How felt about both of them, no more hiding or beating around the bush. Yet, when she saw Izuku and Mei, that excitement was dropping fast. Izuku was walking ahead of Mei and not looking back. Mei was looking at the ground, biting her lip. Yesterday. Hey Izuku, do you think I need a new swimsuit? I may have outgrown this one. Izuku had already turned when he heard his name, and standing there was Mei in her swimsuit. Her cup had run over to the point that part of her was peeking out for him. He had quickly turned his head and in the process, his arm had swung, knocking over his drink all over the primary circuit board. He was doing some modifications, one completely frying it. Freak. He yelled, jumping out of his seat, he tripped over some wires, fell back, and hit his head. OMG, Izuku. She called out as she ran over to him, with things bouncing. Damn, it Mei. He yelled, holding his head. I'm sorry, I was just, she started to say. What, playing some game with me? He sat up, pulled his hand away, and there was some blood. Yes, no, I. Well, are you happy now? Was it funny? Did it give you the reaction you wanted? Huh? He said, his voice rich with anger. I'm sorry, Mei said, stepping back, he had never yelled at her. She was doing this yes to get a reaction out of him, but she was annoyed that he had seemingly been avoiding her, avoiding looking at her, spending time with her, and not wanting to sit on the couch and cuddle to watch movies. But he was talking about going to the planetarium with Melissa, working out with her, going on runs. They had invited Mei, but she didn't want to go, but that was beside the point. She just wanted the two most influential people to be with her always, why was that so bad? She tried to get cuddled by them and take baths with them. Izuku wouldn't do it anymore, and that made her mad. Melissa would, she would take baths with her, though Mei would have to argue and pout about it. She just wanted Izuku and Melissa at all times. Why was that so difficult? They could share a bed, take baths together, and work on inventions all day. He wouldn't even hold her hand. Last year, she had seen Melissa and Izuku doing it while watching some boring movie about people kissing and stuff. But when they got caught, they jumped away from each other like they had been electric shock. You happy now? He yelled. Now I have to rebuild that whole thing before we leave tomorrow for Island. He grabbed a clean paper towel and held it to his head. Yes, Mei, you need a new swimsuit top, your breasts have gotten much bigger than last year. He turned and stormed out of the room. He didn't talk to her or text her the rest of the night, his door was locked. He never locked his door. Car ride headphones, plane ride headphones, and sleep. Today. Melissa plastered a smile on her face and ran up to her friends. Izuku gave her a weak smile when she came up, but with a good hug, Mei visibly brightened up and hugged her tightly. Are you guys alright? She asked. I am just tired. I was up all night, I must get into the lab as soon as possible, Izuku replied. Okay, I gotta set up right across from our normal lab, so we should get going soon, Mel said, a little uncertain. When they got to the transport, instead of piling in the back like usual, she saw Izuku hesitate and get in the front seat while Mei and Melissa were in the back. Once they were in motion, she saw Izuku fire off a quick text, probably to Inko, before he put back on his headphones and just stared out the window. What is going on, Mei? And who pissed in his Cheerios? Melissa whispered. I messed up, Mei said sullenly. He was working on the main circuit board for the project and I wanted to tease him. Her shoulders sank, the circuit board got fried, and he fell and cut his head. It was bleeding. He yelled at me, I have never seen him so mad at me. May, Melissa sighed. What, he won't hold my hand like he did with you. He gets weird about cuddling. He won't let me take a bath with him. He let me sleep with him. He won't join me in the hot tub. He won't stop talking to Asuka Yuri at school. He even went to her house. Without me. Mai was getting more upset. I just wanted to tease him and make him get all red. Okay, hold on, who is Asuka Yuri? And why was he at her house? Melissa said. I don't know. All he said was he needed to help her with something, and then the next thing I knew, she and her friends were inviting him to the movies. They wanted us to go to some pool party, but he said no because we would be here. And he got into a fight with Hito, and he won't say anything about why. I watched a terrifying movie, and he cuddled me till I fell asleep, then he got out of bed and slept on the floor. May was talking very fast and to the point of almost hyperventilating. Melissa wanted to know more about this Asuka, but that would have to wait. She put her arm around May, pulling her into a hug. What if he doesn't want to be my friend anymore? May, he is upset and maybe he has some reasons why. Melissa responded. He cares about you, he is just mad, that's all, let him cool off and you try to relax. I will talk to him. Once they arrived, Izuku went to his door and just set his bag inside, grabbed a box, and went straight to the lab. May just went off to her room to unpack. Mel kept her company for a while before she sucked it up and went to check on Izuku. He was sitting at the work counter running the board through some calibrations and in a tight black compression shirt that read Shield Industries. It was a workout shirt she had given him, it was doing him justice. Over the years, while Melissa had started working out, it had taken off once her uncle had given her a training regimen and had whipped up one for Izuku, her workout partner. They would send each other messages daily after they worked out or to motivate each other. It was not an excuse to send a boy she thought were cute selfies of her abs or the cute workout uniform she had just bought. Nor was it encouraging him to return the favor so she could monitor his progress. The video from May of him working in the forge at home, bare-chested, sweaty, with some soot on his face and chest, was because she was just curious about the type of work. She did not log into her camera feed to watch him and May in their overalls, all sweaty, working on some creation in the middle of the night instead of sleeping. Enjoying the way May would wear overalls with just a sports bra. She watched as he gave a weary sigh. You okay there, cowboy? Izuku smiled as he looked up. Yeah, everything is good, we won't be set back in our timeline. What's going on, Izu? Mel said, walking over and leaning on the workbench across from him. She saw him look up, then look away and blush slightly. She looked, and her shirt was loose, so it dangled forward, giving him a nice view down her shirt. She blushed and stood up more. Nothing, Mel, he replied. Just trying to get this done. You know it was an accident, Mel said softly. It was, but she wanted to elicit a response without thinking of the consequences, he said with a note of hurt that she picked up on. All the time she does stuff, it is just so confusing. Then there is you. He added, sounding exasperated. What did I do? Mel said defensively. Nothing, I guess, but I don't know, he sounded frustrated as he flopped on the stool. Can we just fast forward a year and a half till we apply to UA? Sure, just invent a time fast forward machine. She immediately ran around the table and grabbed his hands. I am kidding, don't start. She stopped and looked down. They were holding hands again, and this warmth spread from her fingertips to her whole body. When she looked at his face, he looked at her, tension between them was increasing. They both pulled their hands away with a shared deep blush and look away. Hey, if you are done here, why don't you get some sleep? I know we have a lot of stuff to do while you are here. Do you think you will be up to cake and ice cream for May tomorrow night? Melissa said a little shyly after a nervous cough. Yeah, Mel, that sounds fine. He stood up. She wondered when he got taller than her, she hadn't noticed it earlier, but now she was keenly aware of it, out of stupidity or habit, neither would be able to tell which they hugged. That warmth began again, and this time, it went fast. She pulled back enough to tilt her head slightly to look at him, he was gazing down at her. Time slowed, and he started to lean down, she tilted up, eyes closed. The sound of the door beeping and opening made them nearly jump out of their skin. Melissa, are you in here? Her father called. The two teens jumped back from each other. Oh, hello Izuku. Happy to see you. Hello, sir, Izuku replied, ignoring the slight voice squeak. So, this is it, huh? Can you really get a prototype up and running here? David said, walking over to shake Izuku's hand. Yes sir, Izuku replied, with a firm handshake and smile. If it doesn't clear the benchmarks I set forth, then we are going to put a stop to this hero nonsense, he said, directed to Melissa. Sir, I understand your concern, but with the capture weapons we have designed and the amount of physical work Melissa has put in, Izuku countered. Melissa was surprised at his reaction, typically, he was reticent about things. Are you her father? David said, his voice tinged with anger. No sir, obviously I am not. Keep to your inventing and let me handle my daughter. David said, cutting him off. You can tell Melissa that she cannot be a hero all you want, but in the end, she will be 18 and can decide for herself what course she wants her life to take, Izuku fired back. She doesn't need your blessing or mine, all she is asking for is support in following her dream, something I pledged to her years ago. Listen, Izuku, I don't know what has gotten into you today, but I will overlook it, David nearly sneered at the young man. If you want to continue to run your mouth, then we can have another conversation about your stay on this island. Izuku was about to talk when Melissa stepped in between them and took Izuku's hand. She had her back to her father and pleaded with him with her eyes. I apologize, Mr. Shield. I am jet-lagged and tired. Please forgive my outburst, Izuku said with a bow. I shall seek my bed. He said, stepping past and walking out of the lab. You better talk with him, Melissa. David said once the door was closed. I will, father, but nothing. You are my only daughter and I will not let you risk your life foolishly. David's voice was raised, he paused and took a deep breath. Melissa, I see how hard you have worked and how much effort you, May, and Izuku have put in. I had hoped that this was nothing but a flight of fancy or a childhood dream that would run its course. But that doesn't seem to be the case with every passing year. You are going to be 17 years old this year. I wish you focus on the work here rather than chasing some dream of heroics where you can get hurt or possibly killed. But you said we had to prove it was viable, you gave us benchmarks we had to reach. Melissa replied. I did, he said. Melissa, I am a man of my word, it doesn't mean that I have to agree with a smile on my face. But if we do it, then we can talk after that, David touched her shoulder. You should get to bed. He kissed her forehead before leaving the room. Izuku. He walked into his room and rubbed his face. What happened? He thought. Was I about to kiss Melissa? Jesus, what is wrong with me? Did she want me to kiss her? Do I want to kiss her? Do I want to kiss May? Wait, why am I thinking about kissing May? For just talking back to her dad. What is wrong with me? He sank to the ground on the other side of the door, his knees curled up, he folded his arms and rested his head on them. I don't like fighting with May, but I freak. He got to his feet and stared at the empty room, he grabbed his hoodie and left the room, he exited the facility and walked off into the night of Island. This wasn't dangerous, the island was more secure and safe. They had invested heavily in their safety and security, and it showed. Not wanting to be around too many people, he headed to the shore, it was late and he wouldn't bump into many people. The boardwalk on this side of the island was closed at this time of night. It catered more to the private residences on that side of the island. He wandered towards the shops, stopping to pick up a broken toy he saw sticking out of the bin. He grabbed a few more items he saw that he could use to tinker with it, of course, he had a mini tool kit in his pocket. Sitting on the sand, he stared out over the water, not even looking at what he was doing, his quirk guiding his hands. It wasn't something he did often, but he liked to do it when his mind was clouded and he needed to drift off. The moon was high, still in the night sky, bathing the beach in its light, he looked out over the waves, trying to figure out what was wrong with him. It was about when his hand stopped moving that he realized he wasn't alone. There was a girl about his age, he thought, but she looked like she had stepped out of a beauty magazine. Her pale skin glowed in the moonlight, a red flowing dress fluttered lightly in the night breeze, her black hair trailing behind her matching the dress. He would look for the fan machine and photo crew if he knew that no one else was there. She hadn't noticed him as he was honestly enthralled with her, he had never wanted to take up photography, but he understood that desire. Then they noticed her wiping her eyes like she had been crying. She saw her look at her phone and he could visibly see her steady herself. No, father, I have no intention of coming back to the party, I will not be marrying that disgusting pig. I am going to go into heroics. I don't care. No, father, I don't. If that is your wish, then fine. I will have to figure it out. I don't know, tell mother I love her and wish you a wonderful life. She stared at the phone before completely breaking down, she crouched down and buried her face in her hands, crying. Izuku set what he was tinkering aside and ran over to her, Miss, are you alright? She looked up, started, and fell back on her butt. Up close, she was even more beautiful, her dress had a plunging neckline, he looked up as he offered her his hand. I am sorry. I didn't mean to startle you, but you were crying and seemed upset. She immediately put her hand on her chest, but when she noticed that he was looking away, she had to give him at least credit, most boys or men, for that matter, took too much delight in looking at her like some courtesan or sex object. Izuku reached into his pocket and pulled out a tissue pack, here, so you dry your eyes, he said. She looked at the simple gesture, and it made her smile, it reminded her of her books at home, of the night coming to help the fair maiden. Home, she thought. She didn't have a home, she didn't have anything. She sniffed again, she took the tissue and his hand as he helped her up. She pulled one from the pack and dabbed at her eyes. "Thank you, sir," she said. "Are you always out along the beach at night looking to provide tissues to crying girls?" "No, I was just," he paused. "Are you alright? There is a vending machine over that way, I can buy you a water or something." "Why would you do that?" she wondered aloud. "You're crying," he said. "I may not be able to fix or even help, but I can at least listen if you are willing to talk." She watched as he removed his jacket and offered it to her. "Here, you can wear that if you are cold." She was a bit chilled, gratefully she took the interesting jacket and put it on. Unlike anything she had ever worn before, she had seen it on television and some of the staff wearing them, she believed they were called sweatshirts or hoodies. It was very warm, probably from the boy who was wearing it. When he removed it, she noticed that tight black shirt he was wearing, she also noticed it said Shield Industries. A support company. He is probably being nice to cozy up for some contract and trying to use me. "Do you work at Shield Industries?" she said, ready to take his coat off and throw it in his face. "No," he shook his head. "My friend gave me this." Her anger softened. "Would you like water?" "Yes, please, what is your name?" she replied, following after him just off his shoulder. "Izuku Midoriya," he looked back and smiled. "And yours?" She paused for a moment. "Yor Nakamura," she said. "Would it be alright if I call you Izuku? You can call me Yor." "Sure," he replied. Once they hit the boardwalk, she noticed he stopped and offered her his hand to step up. Then, he moved to the outside as they walked along the road. She saw the vending machines a short distance away. She had to admit she was excited, she had never heard anything from a vending machine before, she had seen it on television and read about it. "What would you like?" he asked. She didn't know what to pick, she was looking at everything, her eyes lit up when, at the prospect of a hot tea coming out of the machine, she pointed at it and looked at him. "I would like that one if it is alright." His smile was nice, it was gentle and reassuring. He made the selection, and 2 cans dropped. He was about to hand it to her, but she saw him pause and open before doing so. "Careful, it's hot." When she took the can, he noticed a curious look on her face. "Your nails." She looked at her hand, then back to him. "It looked like you just had them done. My mom told me that I should open drinks so their nails don't break right away or chip." She smiled, it was a very valid reason. She took a drink, and it was hot. The tea left a lot to be desired, but it was warm and more important to her. He motioned for them to sit. Once she did, he took a seat. "Are you okay?" "No, but I am better," she smiled weakly. "Thanks to you." "Do you want to talk about it?" he said. "I want to be a hero," she said, looking at the can of hot tea in her hand. "My father doesn't want me to, he wants me to enter a marriage arrangement. I am the only daughter, and I wouldn't mind doing so if any of these men supported the idea of me being a hero and didn't want to treat me like a meal ticket or a sex object." She sighed. "Tonight, the person in question kept looking down at my dress and trying to lure me away. I may be naive, but I know better than that. You had the decency to look away when I was on the ground, offer me your coat, walk outside the sidewalk, and let me choose my drink. So your family must come from money," he responded. "I don't know how things work for those in that position, but I have a friend and she wants to be a hero. Her father has sent the benchmarks that she must clear for him to approve. They are pretty high, but I think we can do it." "Why is he setting such high benchmarks?" Yor asked. "My friend is quirkless. How is she going to go into heroics?" "She had been training, she is brilliant, so my other friend and I have been helping her design and build support items as a workaround. This summer, we are supposed to get a prototype suit ready to deal with the protection and integration all put together." He looked off in the distance. "It's just today I got into an argument with her father. I told him that soon she will be 18 and she can do what she wants at that point." He sighed. "Are you an inventor?" she asked. "Yes, I am, my friend May and even Melissa are. Melissa wants to be a hero. We met her on Island when we were 12 and she told us about her dream and I thought it was amazing." He looked at Yor and smiled. "Does your quirk help with inventing?" she mused, taking a drink of the tea, wondering how it was hot, but the can was only warm. "Yeah, I wanted to be a hero when I was little, but my mom told me that I could help more people by being an inventor, so I want to help people. If you have the heart and passion, you can do anything. You may need some help, but that doesn't make it any less tangible. I hate people telling others they can't do something because of something as stupid as the type of quirk you have." He was getting fired up and passionate, Yor couldn't help but be drawn in. "I don't know what your quirk is, but if you want to be a hero, then you should try for it." He looked at her. "Maybe you will pass the test, or maybe you won't. The same goes for Melissa, I don't know if she will pass, but I know I can help her achieve her dream. I want to help people, heroes or not." "What if I asked for your help?" Yor asked. "Okay, how can I help?" he said quickly. "But I don't have money or anything I can pay you with," she responded. "I am not getting paid now." He laughed. Not for helping Melissa. I am sure the patents and inventions will help me in the future, but that is not why I am doing it. But if you succeed, then she will be a huge advertisement for your work, Yor pointed out. Also, if she can do it with your inventions, then everyone can with your inventions. Suppose you can elevate a quirkless student to the ranks of hero and have that hero graduate from UA, especially if they do well and break into the higher ranks. They will break down your door to get your inventions and help. Izuku looked at her, shocked he hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about that. Yor was shocked, one would assume he was lying. That he had hedged his bets on making this Melissa his key to wealth and glory, but the look on her face told her otherwise. Would you still help me? I also plan on going to UA next year, what if you help me and your friend doesn't get in? Or what happens when she gets in and someone else with a quirk doesn't? What kind of uproar will happen when the first quirkless hero takes the stage? You and your friends will set the world on its head. Then let the world be set on its head, he responded. Good, if a quirkless person can be a hero, why can't anyone? That is very noble of you, she replied. Not sound business but noble nonetheless. What makes you sure you can make something so your friend could be a hero? By quirk, he responded. I can make anything. Yor's eyes widened, do you wave your hand and it just appears? She said in surprise, wondering if his quirk was like hers. No, I wish, he said. I still need the materials. So if you have the materials, you can make anything? She said, he nodded. Do you need to know how to make it? He shook his head. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of the sphere with the red button after a moment of searching. She saw a girl referred to as Mei and heard Izuku's voice, though it sounded much younger, as the girl dived forward, hitting the red button. The chaos that occurred made Yor jump some, but she was enthralled and laughing as many fireworks and confetti, the laughter and the happiness of the duo, then the birthday banner. Once it was over, Izuku smiled, I made that in my sleep. Yor's eyes widened. I don't even know how I built the rocket or designed fireworks, we had to reverse engineer it so I could understand it. So, with unlimited supplies, you could design anything. He nodded. A giant robot to smash a city. He nodded. Mei wants a mecha, so that is on the list. Mei and I already built 2 robots. Eva and Wally. He showed her pictures and videos. Last year, we finished the design for Eva. He showed the evolution to the triangle body, floating head, and the arms that came seamlessly out of her body, showing her flying. It is just like the movie, Yor said in wonder. What about SCHVRMMMMMMM? Quishu. She waved her hands around like she was holding an imaginary sword. Izuku leaned close and saw him dig deep into folders on his phone. The video filled the screen, it was shot at night and very dark wherever it was. Okay, it should last 30 seconds before the power source fries, she heard Izuku say. The giggling response must have been Mei Yor guessed. Do it. You nearly fell off the bench when it came alive, brilliant blue. She watched as it cut through some metal at a junkyard, it made all the noise before it sparked and died. You just stared at him. He smirked at her, I know, right. He snapped his fingers, I wonder what I built on the beach. Wait, you built something on the beach? Yeah, I found this broken toy and some other stuff and I just let my quirk make something while thinking. Then I saw you and forgot about it. He rubbed his head sheepishly. Wait here. I'll go get it. You nodded as he ran off. He was nice, she thought, but most of all, he just seemed natural. And real was something Yor had a hard time encountering. He was naive in some ways regarding business but seemed sweet. She would agree to marry him, he would be a perfect support and she could be his ideal support, she could provide him with any material he needed to make anything. Imagine if they had a child that possessed a merged version of their quirks. She had to be careful of what she made as she could destabilize the economy with fake gems. She grew a little sad at the thought of how empty her life had been. A boy she met on the beach who treated her like a person and not a thing was one of the best people she had ever met. But he didn't know her name or what she could do. She would tell him, but not now. She just wanted to be Yor for a little bit longer. He came running back a few moments later, she was relieved to see him and wondered if he had ditched her. He was holding a metal white sphere with a silver band around it. Do you know what it is? She asked dubiously. He laughed, I do, my quirk will tell me what a machine is, how to break it down, counter it. Sometimes, it doesn't when I make something in my sleep, but we are okay this time. Hold out your hand. Somewhat hesitantly, she held out her hand, placed the sphere in her hand, and hit a small button, sphere recognize new command owner. Recognize new command owner. A robotic voice resonated from the sphere. Okay, talk. Izuku told Yor excitedly. What do I say? Yor responded. New voice command recognized, the sphere said. Yor nearly dropped it. Tell it to activate, Izuku said. Activate, Yor said unsure. The orb suddenly lit up and floated off her hand. Yor moved her hand, which followed her palm, hovering away from it. Yor started to laugh and smile. Tell it to circle 2 meters out, Izuku whispered. Circle 2 meters out. Yor said. Confirmed. What else can it do? Yor asked in wonder as it circled her. She walked towards it and it moved with her. Simple commands, he replied. Go and come back. It has a range of about 3 meters or so. It should last about 3 hours before the batter on it dies. This is amazing. Yor turned and had the sphere go up above her head. This would be amazing for rescue heroes in dark areas, it could help guide lost people. I would need some upgrades. I know I was thinking the same thing, I also think I could give it a sensor to examine rubble looking for heat signatures. Imagine if a hero gets on a disaster scene and can let 20 of these things go and start looking for survivors. He said excitedly. Or checking for structural weaknesses in a damaged building. Yor responded excitedly. Or a body cam for police and heroes, so if they are not doing things right, the public has proof, or the hero can defend themselves from allegations. Some storage, maybe. He said, first aid or some small items. Two-way communication. Yor added, you can record a message and send it to someone as if the communications get jammed. I could maybe even give it a projector so it could relay visual messages or project a map that the other ones have made by scouting, so the hero can see where things are, he said excitedly. Like a heads-up display, almost a floating map. Yor responded, her excitement growing. How much could you boost the range? I could boost it quite a bit, that is just limited by what I had to work with, he smiled brightly. This can be something cool. It could, that is amazing, Izuku, Yor returned his smile. I don't know why you were out here tonight, but I am glad you were. I still don't know what I will do, but I have hope. Do you have any money? He said gently. No, she said as she began to think more about being out in the world with nowhere to live and no money to survive. I could always make some, I know it would be counterfeiting, but. I can give you some money, his voice brought her out of her thoughts, I can ask Melissa and May. They could help us get you some clothes, but that would need to wait until morning. You can't sleep out here. You can spend the night in my room. Yor was about to say something. There is a lock on the door and I can sleep on the couch. He said quickly. It is like a small suite. I wasn't trying to do anything. He waved his hand defensively in the air and blushed. Yor felt relieved, she had noticed him looking at her, but he looked mainly at her face and looked her in the eyes. He seemed so nice and decent that she worried he might be just like others she had met. Why would you do so much? She asked. You need some help, was his response. And I can help. I may not be rich, but I have some money, I can only ensure you are safe for the night. Melissa and May will help, I would love for you to meet them. I think I would like to meet them as well, Yor responded, she was about to say more, but headlights on the empty road gave them pause. She smiled when Izuku stepped before her, his attention on the car approaching significantly after it slowed down. Yor looked up and called the sphere back to her hand and told it to deactivate, which it did. The vehicle stopped before them, Izuku could tell it was an expensive car and Yor could tell it was her family car. The front door opened and out stepped a bald man with sunglasses who was not welcome. Izuku knew that there was no way he could take the man in the fight, but maybe he could hold him off long enough for Yor to run away. They had probably come to force her to go home. The back door opened and a woman with blue hair dressed in a maid outfit was out. Madam, are you alright? The woman said as the man and Izuku kept eyeing each other. Everything is fine, Aoi, Yor responded. I have no intention of returning home if my father wished me to entertain the thought of this arranged marriage. He was quite upset with your disappearance, but after a heated conversation with your mother, he wishes to negotiate terms, the woman said. Her voice was so crisp and clear, had this natural soothing cadence, but this hint of authority. It would work so well for the sphere, but he pushed that thought from his mind. He couldn't get distracted in case he needed to get his butt kicked so Yor could run. As he offered any terms. No, he did not seem fit to send them with me, but your mother has. All she asks is that you come home this evening and sit down for the discussion in the morning. She gives her word that should negotiations fail, you will be allowed to leave, and that Vigo and I will be allowed to attend you till such time you grow weary of our services and dismiss us from your sight. Aoi bowed her head. She also promised a proper stipend until you graduate from the school of your choice or take a husband. Very well, I accept, Yor said. I know this isn't my place, but what if they lie? Izuku said, and the concern in his eyes made Yor smile. He was a good person. My mother wouldn't lie, Yor responded, she was about to remove the hoodie, but paused. She began to fidget. Izuku, would you mind if I held on to this till the next we meet? I would like to have at least it cleaned as a thank you. That would be fine, he responded. Take the sphere with you, you can keep it. But it's your prototype, she protested. I can remake it. Besides, I need to improve it for everything we talked about, he replied, smiling at her. Then would you mind giving me your phone number? Yor blushed. I would like to be able to keep in touch with you, I don't have many. Of course, Yor, he said, he didn't notice Aoi raise an eyebrow. That way, you can call me if you need help or just need to talk. Like a friend. She said hesitantly. Like a friend. He pulled out his phone as she did. They touched them together and she smiled, seeing his information on the screen. Are you going to be on the island for much longer? We are here for the summer. She replied, her heart filling with hope. Would you like to hang out again? He asked, feeling nervous. Yes. She said quickly, stepping forward, she blushed and stepped back, tucking her hair behind her ear. I mean, if you would like to, that sounds nice, she said, her voice soft and gentle. Who cute. He thought. Be safe, Yor, if you need any help, let me know. He bowed slightly to her, which she mimicked as he turned to walk away. Yor watched him leave until he walked around the bend, then she walked towards Aoi, who was patiently waiting. She climbed into the car. Once inside, Aoi sat across from her and the vehicle went into motion. Yor? Madam. He was an unknown person, as you and Vigo have told me that it wise to use an alias should we become separated to ascertain the person's intentions, Yor responded. He may have acted differently if he knew who I was. It was nice to be treated as a normal person. Lady Momo, Aoi said, but she stopped herself. I understand. Momo pulled out her phone, she couldn't stop a smile as she looked at the seventh contact in her phone. Izuku Midoriya. Her father, mother, Aoi, Vigo, Celine and Duncan were in order. The last two were the chef and her tutor. She had a friend's phone number, for the first time, she had a friend. As the car drove off into the night and Izuku made his way home, the god of fate rubbed his hands together in glee, his wife just smiled. Izuku slowly stirred to consciousness, he sat up, rubbed the sleep from his eyes, and sighed. Sleep is a beautiful thing, it helps to put things into perspective. It also brings moments of clarity that make him stop and stare at himself in the mirror. He was attracted to Melissa, and there was no doubt about that. Coupled with what happened in the lab before her father arrived, he sighed. He was attracted to her as well, but he felt guilty about it. They were so close, friends for so long, and he felt bad for looking at her that way like he was betraying her parents. Izuku took a deep breath and froze, damn, he needed a bath. He grabbed his headphones and went about getting cleaned up for the day. May awoke, rolling over to find Melissa still asleep. The two girls had stayed up late, talking and talking. She liked waking up with Melissa, she enjoyed snuggling, playing, tickling, and even the occasional kissing practice. But she missed Izuku, their closeness, waking up with him, feeling him beside her, holding her, snuggling her. Why couldn't she sleep with him anymore? Why couldn't they take baths anymore? She loved how he washed her hair, combed through the conditioner, and scrubbed her back. She liked knowing he was looking at her, she enjoyed it. She liked seeing his eyes on her chest or when he would look at her butter body. She wanted him to look just as she liked looking at him. He wasn't allowed to look at anyone but her or maybe Melissa. Melissa would be just fine, May liked looking at her as well. Melissa would take baths with her and showers, May liked doing it and it always made her stomach flutter when they did. She needed to close this distance with Izuku, it was too much, it hurt her heart and she hated that. She slipped out of bed and snuck over, taking the master key from Melissa's bag, grabbed a change of clothes, tucked them under her arm, and sneaked out of the room. May walked over to his door, using the key, and opened the door as quietly as she could. Once inside, she poked her head into his room and saw the bed empty, but obviously, it had been slept in. She heard some noise from the bathroom, so she called him out, but there wasn't any answer. She walked over, peeked in, and saw him sitting in the bath with his headphones on. She smiled, she had made those for him. For his birthday last year. She was going to close this gap between them, they needed to reconnect, and what would be a better way than taking a bath together? Sadly, she didn't need her hair washed. Mel had taken care of that last night, but she would join him in the tub. She smiled, perfect. She thought. They could close the gap, she could apologize, and he would wrap his arms around her and hold her tight. She quickly threw off her oversized shirt, discarded her panties, and slipped into the bathroom. Momo. She emerged from the bathroom, wrapped herself in her towel, and went to the closet. She stopped and looked at the dark green hoodie draped over the back of her chair. She picked it up and smiled, memories of the night before, the metallic orb was on her desk. She thought of how it felt to talk to someone about heroics, about how they could improve this simple thing and make it such a wonderful and amazing support item. The enthusiasm and excitement of a shared passion, of being able to express herself in a way she normally couldn't. She was going to see him again today. She wanted to see him now, but there were other things she had to do. She went to her closet and chose a nice, simple dress for the morning. She pulled up her hair in a ponytail and exited the room. Aoi was waiting. My parents. Momo said. They wait you on the east balcony, madam, Aoi said as she curtsied. Good, Aoi, I plan on seeing Izuku again today. I would like you to find me some suitable clothes to hang out. Momo paused. I would like some jeans. I believe they are called a t-shirt. Aoi's head was down, so Momo couldn't see her raise an eyebrow. As you wish, madam. Momo took a deep breath as she headed to breakfast. She stepped onto the east balcony and saw her parents seated. Her father was reading the newspaper and her mother was sipping her tea. Good morning, mother, Momo said, kissing her cheek. Good morning, father. She took her seat across from him. Good morning, Momo, her mother responded, smiling. She received a hum from behind the newspaper. Shall we have to eat? I would like to discuss terms first, Momo said as she placed her hands on her lap. Her father folded the paper and set it on the table, focusing on her. Before we discuss terms, I would like to hear about the young man you were found with last night, her mother said. I trust that he behaved. Indeed, he did, mother, Momo said proudly. I would say he behaved far better than any of the other suitors I have been forced to meet. He did not let his eyes wander, he extended his hand to help me step onto the road, walked along the outside, and allowed me to choose my drink. Her emphasis on me made her father's gaze harden momentarily. And offered me his aid. He probably did so in hopes of lowering your guard or earning favor, her father said dismissively. According to Vigo, he was wearing a Shield Industries shirt. Yes, I questioned him about that, and he said it was a friend's gift. Also, I gave him a false name, so he would have had to know me on sight. I didn't recognize his name from any of the lists you had me memorize. Momo responded, doing her best to keep her tone neutral. What did he reveal about himself? Her mother asked warmly, trying to keep the conversation from descending into a fight before terms could be reached. He is an inventor, a rather capable one, to be exact. If what he said in regards to his quirk, I dare say he may be one of if not the greatest of not only my generation, but will find his place in the history annuals, Momo said, her voice much warmer when talking to her mother. Her father rolled his eyes as he took a drink of his coffee. That is a bold claim, what evidence do you have to support that, her father said, leaning forward. He showed me some of his inventions as well as something he put together from components he found as he walked towards the beach. Momo picked up the bell on the table, ringing it lightly. Aoi stopped. Aoi, please retrieve the sphere from the room. She looked at her mother and smiled. There were also 2 robots he showed me, like the ones from the movie when I was young, Eva and Wally. Her father suddenly became very interested. What is this young man's name? He said. Izuku Midoriya. Did he mention a partner? Her father inquired. Momo knew that something was amiss. Yes, a girl his age named May, I believe. Isn't it the name of 2 inventors behind Junkyard Support? Her mother said, and her father nodded. Junkyard Support? Momo asked. We already acquired some rights to their inventions, the Sunshine Laundry, the Capture Grenade, and the EVA Domestic Assistance Robot. We are going to be unveiling them for sale this holiday season. Their Wally units are already being used on our cleanup sites. Momo noticed the change in her father's voice, she could detect a hint of excitement. What is he doing here on Island? He is here to aid a friend, Momo replied. She is looking to enter heroics, but as a stipulation of her doing so, there are benchmarks put forth by her father that must be met. Why is that? Her mother asked. According to Izuku, the girl is quirkless, Momo said hesitantly. They are designing items to demonstrate that she can safely pursue heroics. Aoi emerged with the orb in hand, she set it on the table before backing away. This is the device he created on the beach, in fact, he forgot about it and had to go back to retrieve it after he came to ensure I was alright. Momo held out her hand, activate. Voice command recognized. Her parents sat back as the device illuminated and levitated up, floating over to their daughter's outstretched hand. They watched as it hovered and began to follow Momo's hand as she moved it around. Circle out 2 meters, Momo commanded, her parents watched as it did so. Momo called it back and deactivated it, setting it on the table. We talked about this device he made, and we think some amazing upgrades could make this device indispensable to not only the field of heroics, but law enforcement, archaeology, and exploration. Momo was beaming as she spoke, something her mother noticed. Momo began to tell her parents about all the improvements they discussed. Aoyoi Rozu. Momo's father listened to his daughter talk, but he wasn't only partially focused on what she was saying, his mind was racing. Junkyard Support had come out of nowhere with a Sunshine Laundry unit to revolutionize how people were washing their clothes. The industrial models had made a fortune and were being shipped worldwide. They had paid a nice sum for the rights and then again for the Capture Grenade for their support wing. Then, with the Eva and Wally units were put forth, they had negotiated for a percentage of the profits off of each unit sold. With everything so far, not including the Eva units, Izuku Midoriya and Mei Hatsum had already secured their futures. When Eva hit the market, that was going to become generational. Momo tells them they are about to help a quirkless girl become a hero. If they succeed, the revenue they can generate from whatever inventions they create will have the word wealth attached to their names. This orb was just more of that same thing. His daughter was not wrong when she talked about this device revolutionizing different industries. Izuku Midoriya and Mei Hatsune were his daughter's ages. From his investigative reports, before they entered into business with the fledgling company, all their creations came from spare parts from Hatsune's family's junkyard. Hence, the name of their company, they were both tops in their class, with almost guaranteed acceptance to every engineering or support course they applied to. His daughter had stumbled upon a windfall. If she could marry one either both, not only would he give his blessing, but the increase to the Aoi Corporation would see the company through for at least the next century. The plot begins to form when he hears that Momo intends to meet up again with Izuku and that he wants to introduce her to his friends. If he could maneuver Momo, Izuku, or Mei to form a romantic relationship, their marriage would be worth more than anyone else. Even if not, she could get them to work exclusively for the Aoi Corporation. Aoi. Ai's mind immediately thought of many of the same things her husband did, but what caught her attention was how her daughter talked about the encounter. It is evident that it had left an impression on Momo. Kai smiled, she knew of her daughter's love of romance novels. After all, she gave Momo her first one. It was something that mother and daughter shared. Did she think he was a knight approaching a crying maiden? They planned to meet again to become more acquainted over the summer. Kai thought of love and romance descending like a whirlwind upon her dear Momo. A summer love. She also thought of perhaps a friendship that would last a lifetime, her daughter the hero and her best friends the inventors going out of their way to keep Momo safe. If Izuku Mei would go this far for a quirkless friend, then asking them to make something or share some of what they made to keep Momo safe would surely be a simple request. Momo. I would like to discuss terms, Momo said after she stopped talking about the sphere. What are you seeking? Her father said, leaning forward again. I wish for these meetings with suitors to cease, Momo said after a pause. I want to find my partner, someone who will support me in my desire to pursue a career in heroics. She put her hand over her heart. Mother. I know that asking you to allow me to do so is selfish, but I believe I have more to offer the world than just being someone I care not for's wife. Just some objects for them to possess and do with as they please. These suitors want that from me, they do not wish to give me agency. I want to find love and marry for that reason. I fear for your safety, her mother said tenderly. I fear for that as well, and for you have to expose yourself while pursuing heroics, her father said. The thought of my daughter running around half naked does not sit well. Momo paused, maybe Izuku would help her but they just met. The worst he could say is no and he did offer to help in any way he could. What if I can settle those concerns? Momo said. What if I can devise a way to put those concerns to rest? If you can do that by the end of summer, then I will agree to your terms, her father said. Momo immediately perked up and he stopped her by holding his hand. But if you do not, then you will not pursue heroics, you will attend a proper university pursuing a degree in business. Momo took a deep breath. I ask that I be allowed to choose whom I marry. That is acceptable, her father said. Dear. I saw what Gao was doing, but the critical thing for Kai was that he would agree to allow Momo to try and find her husband. That is acceptable. Momo. I agree to the terms put forth. Good, let us eat, her father said, picking up the bell before him and signaling the chef. Spice begins. Just a bath. Izuku lightly dozed as he sat listening to music in the bath. He was suddenly jolted to awareness when someone stepped into the tub and sat quickly between his legs. Naked flesh pressed up against him and a plump bottom was pressing against his crotch. He immediately opened his eyes, of course, and saw Mei. He tossed his headphones off. Mei, what are? He never finished the sentence before grabbing his arms and wrapping them around her chest. He froze, one of his hands was directly on her breast. Don't go, he heard her plead. I miss you, I miss this. Izuku, why don't you want to cuddle me anymore? Why won't you let me bathe with you anymore? Mei, he stuttered out. We can't do this, you father. I don't care what he, my mother or Inko want, Mei pulled his arms tighter. I want this. Why can't I have what I want? Do you not want to hold me anymore? It's not that, Mei. Then what is it? I don't like this. I don't like this distance between us. Mei rubbed her cheek against his arm. I am sorry I made you spill your drink on the circuit board, but I like it when you look at me. I like it when you look at my chest, get flustered, or look at my butt. I want you to look. He heard her sniffle. She released her hold on his hands and he immediately pulled them away. Mei turned around in the tub quickly so he couldn't escape. She was kneeling facing him, her breasts exposed, her entire body. He quickly looked up at the ceiling. Look at me, she pleaded. Mei. Look at me. She yelled, why won't you look at me? He could hear her voice break. Please, Izuku, look at me. She pleaded. Izuku's heart was pounding and breaking simultaneously. He took a deep breath, tilted his head, and looked into Mei's crying eyes. "I am looking at you, Mei," he whispered. "Do you not like me anymore?" "No, Mei, that isn't the problem." "Then tell me what it is. We can invent something to fix it. Or you can if I can't figure it out." Izuku could hear the pleading in her voice, the anguish in her eyes toward him. Mei was studying his face. The silence filled the room till it was almost deafening, as Izuku couldn't find the words. Mei was searching almost desperately for the answer, and then, slowly, it seemed to come to her. "Izuku, I love you," she whispered. Izuku tried to speak, indeed, she was talking in a friendly, family-friendly way. "Izuku, I love you, I love you, I love Melissa. Do you like Melissa? I mean, do you want to kiss her?" He could only nod. "Do you want to kiss me? Not practice kissing, but really kiss me?" He would have to file that one away for later. "I want to kiss you." Izuku watched as she leaned forward and closed her eyes. A million things ran through his head. Mei had just confessed to him that she loved him and loved Melissa. He felt the same, there was no denying that. How had she figured all this out in the bathtub with him? Was it wrong for him to love Mei like this, his childhood friend, his partner? That made him stop, she was his partner. She held his hands at night, pushed him further, and helped with his quirk. That day, all those years ago, when he first got lost in her family's junkyard. She was his past, his present, and his future. He wanted her to be with him forever. He would have to explain to her parents how much he cared for her, but that was later. Right now, one of the girls he loved had just confessed to loving him and asked to be kissed. Izuku leaned forward and answered a request. Mei's arms immediately went around his neck and pulled him tighter, deepening their kiss. Izuku had never kissed or kissed anyone before. When she opened her mouth, he hesitantly did the same. A bolt of electricity ran through him when Mei took him to the country of France for kissing lessons. He clumsily tried to return the favor. Mei was now straddling him, her breast mashed up against him, his hand on her naked back, her crotch pressed against his. Now that there was no crying or fear, instead, it was two naked wet people making out. His extra appendage woke up. Mei felt something hard poking against her lady part. She moved some, and it rubbed just right, Mei moaned. Izuku froze when Mei moved. She slid along his shaft, it was the single most pleasurable thing that had ever happened to him. Then she did it again and again, his hands found her hips, and he ground against her. Their kissing stopped as their moans filled the air, and their pace increased, as moans turned into words of "Don't stop, that feels so good," and "Izuku Mei." "Something's building," Mei panted. "Izuku, something is building up inside, oh sweet Megatron, oh god Izuku, Izuku, Izuku," she screamed as she came. Izuku had just been repeating her name, but when she screamed like that, he felt himself come as well. Mei's mind was racing. Did they have sex? His penis was at her vagina. No, wait, they said it has to go inside. She remembered that much from that boring class. She had been working on a design for most of the class. If that felt that good, then sex would feel even better. Mom said she had to be unique the first time to ensure she was in love. She loved Izuku, and the thought of any other boy doing this made her want to vomit, but if it was Izuku. "Do you want to have sex with me?" Mei asked as her head rested on his shoulder. Again Izuku froze up some, his dick was still hard, and she was right there, he could feel her sex right against him, it wouldn't take much. "I do, but not yet," he said, though somewhat reluctantly. "Why not?" she said, she loved feeling him against her, this was even better than cuddling. "I want to, but I need to tell your parents how I feel about you," Izuku said. "I owe your father that." "I am not sure I understand, but okay," Mei responded. "Can we do this with Melissa, too?" Izuku had to reboot. Once he did, Mei started to grind again, this time, when she leaned back and rocked her hips, Izuku leaned forward and captured one of her breasts in his mouth. Mei came so hard that she had to reboot. Spice over. After reluctantly and with difficulty disentangled, they got out of the tub and dressed. Izuku nearly lost his resolve several times with how casually Mei would be bent over in front of him, or when she was on all fours on the bed looking for her phone, it was much easier to focus once they were clothed. "So, can we do that with Melissa?" Mei casually asked. Izuku paused. "Mei, will you be my girlfriend?" Of course. Mei had seen enough things to know that meant they got to kiss and cuddle all she wanted. "Do you want Melissa to be our girlfriend?" Izuku said hastily. "Oh yeah," Mei responded enthusiastically. A knock at the door. "Izuku, it's Melissa. Have you seen Mei? She wasn't in her room, and my key is missing." "Yes, she is," he called out as Mei ran over and opened the door. Melissa was relieved to see the huge smile on Mei's face. Mei grabbed Melissa's hand and pulled her inside the room. "Mei, what are you doing?" she protested. "Melissa, guess what?" Mei said excitedly. "What is that, Mei?" "Izuku is my boyfriend now." Oh, Melissa looked sad but smiled quickly to cover it up. How did that happen? She asked awkwardly. I joined him in the bath, but that isn't important. Wait, how is that not the important part? Melissa was now confused. Because we want you to be our girlfriend, Melissa looked over at Izuku. Mel, I love you, I love her. She loves me and loves you. It may be. Yes. Melissa said quickly. Yes, oh god, yes, I want this too. I was going to try and explain to you both this summer how I wanted to be in a relationship with you both. Izuku was so confused, but that ended when Melissa jumped into his arms, wrapped her legs around his waist, and took him on another trip to France. Then May boarded that flight, and he watched them take that trip. It got hotter every moment that Izuku thought he had seen the hottest thing. Melissa broke apart from May and kissed Izuku lightly on the lips. Okay, we can't spend all day kissing. We have work to do. But we can later, right? May said hopefully. Oh yeah, Melissa said with a smile. Hey, Izuku, where did you go last night? I went for a walk down to try and get my head all figured out, Izuku snapped his fingers. I met an adorable girl named Yor. She has family trouble, but I hope it gets all sorted out. Was she pretty? Melissa asked, her eyebrow raised. Yeah, how did you know? It swore there was a modeling shoot going on, Izuku, oblivious to his danger, described finding Yor on the beach and everything that happened last night. You cheated on me? May yelled. Yeah, what wait, no how. Izuku said in a panic. You went and invented something with some crying rich girl and gave her the prototype. May crossed her arms and started pouting. Wait, May, it wasn't like that, I made the sphere on my own and we just ended up brainstorming. And. I want to meet her. May demanded. I would as well, Melissa said with a hint of malice. Izuku's shoulders slumped, defeated. I have her number, maybe she can join us for dinner or something. The lab. It was different that day in the lab, the energy was different between all three. It was because everything was out in the open between them. So there was no awkwardness when they touched each other. Instead, it was excitement and this electricity. There was a time when they were waiting for something and their hands would slip under the table and their fingers would interlock. May was on a tear, the distance between her and Izuku was gone. The strange feeling that made her chest tight when she saw him and Melissa laughing or being close was all gone. She could let it all go and do what she did best, and that was invent. By the end of the day, May had stabilized the flight system and fixed the armor interlock. Though she did love pulling one of them into the storage room to kiss, they all did. Melissa sat on her stool, watching the code compile with bated breath. When it all matched, she jumped up and down, hugging Izuku and May, with relief that life was working out. Watching things falling into place, she couldn't help but stare at the armor coming to life. She watched Izuku feeding everything into the machines as they began to work layering and bonding the different pieces of a gold titanium alloy. Melissa sat there staring at the material. She went to the shipping manifest and after a quick calculation, she found double the amount of material present. Melissa raised an eyebrow and she started tracking it back. Junkyard support. Did you two order more alloy? She yelled. I didn't, Izuku said innocently. Alloy? What is that? Never heard of it, May yelled. Melissa walked over, Izuku, no, seriously, what are you two doing? That cost millions. Izuku nodded, that is true, I will have our accountant look into it. Do you even have an accountant? Melissa said, raising an eyebrow. No idea, you would have to ask my mom, but May and I told her what we wanted, Izuku kissed her. It is almost done, all of it, everything. Melissa stared at him. By the time the test rolls around, your father won't be able to deny you your dream. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, he said, make sure you tell May. Melissa nodded and ran over to May. The two girls hugged and cried a little before they stopped for the day. Momo. She had been happy to receive a text from Izuku inviting her to hang out and meet his friends. She looked in the mirror and bit her lip before turning to Aoi. Are they supposed to be this tight? She asked, referring to the jeans that looked like she had been poured into, the black thigh-high boots, the fitted shirt, and the black leather jacket. Momo hardly recognized herself. Madam? Yes, Aoi. May I say something? Momo turned to her maid, of course. One cannot build a friendship on a lie, as of now, you have only lied about your name. Once you explain, I am sure he will understand that if you continue to perpetuate the lie, it will end with shattered trust that even if rebuilt, there will always be a crack in the foundation. Aoi stared at Momo. It has been such a long time since we have seen you so aglow, we would not want to see that leave so soon. Momo nodded, thank you Aoi. When Izuku saw Yor he was frozen, May and Melissa were also. Izuku wasn't lying, May muttered. May looked at Melissa, whose eyes widened, and then she heard Melissa curse. Melissa, what is wrong? That is Momo Yaoi Rozu, Melissa said. The Yaoi Rozu Corporation, May said, looking at a beautiful girl talking to her boyfriend. We sold some of our inventions to them. Why would she lie to Izuku? I don't know, maybe she is trying to get some information or something from him, Melissa's eyes narrowed. Maybe she is trying to lure him to work for her company. Izuku and Momo. Wow, you look so different, Izuku rubbed the back of his head, were you able to work something out? Or are we going to help you go on the lam? Momo smiled, we were able to come to an accord, that is part of why I was so excited to speak with you. Momo took a deep breath, her hand was over her chest. I need your help. Okay, Izuku said with a smile. But you should meet Melissa and May, I am sure they will be able to help us figure out whatever you need. He turned to walk towards the girls, but Momo reached out and grabbed his hand. Melissa went to march over there and tell that girl off, but May grabbed her hand and shook her head. Is everything alright? Izuku said, looking down at Momo's grip on his hand, they both blushed as she released him. Izuku, I have to tell you something first, Momo said. Izuku nodded. My name is not your Nakamura, it is Momo Yaoirozu. Of the Yaoirozu Corporation. He stepped back and Momo flinched. Yes, but please let me explain, Momo held out her hand, hoping he would stop, there is a reason I didn't tell you who I was, I didn't know who you were until today. Izuku stopped. I was without protection on the beach and a stranger had just approached me. I gave a false name for my safety, but then you were so nice and we started talking and the orb, then now I showed up. Is that why you were annoyed by my shirt? He said. I thought maybe you were sent to try something, but then we talked and I knew that wasn't the case, Momo said. I am sorry Izuku, if you want nothing further to do with me, I understand. She did her best to keep the sadness in her voice at bay. He took her hand, let's meet Melissa and May. Momo looked shocked. You weren't faking how upset you were on the beach and I told you I would help you. If you need help, Momo, then I will help you. Momo smiled as she walked over to meet May and Melissa, blushing that he had been so bold as to take her hand in such a manner. Help. Momo took a deep breath as she laid out her predicament, I know I have no right to ask this, but do you think you could help me? If Izuku can figure out the quirk clothing problem, May said, I am sure we can solve that defense problem rather easily. It may need to be tailored to you, but that is a later problem. I understand your situation, Melissa added. I want to help as well, I have some ideas. We can brainstorm something. I don't want this to take away from what you are all trying to accomplish, I think what you are striving for, Militia, is admirable, amazing, and brave, Momo said with a smile. It is going to shake up the world. That is the plan, Melissa said with a smile. Shield Industries. David sank back in his chair, words turning to ash in his mouth. How long? It happened a few years ago, All Might said, sipping bourbon. I am sorry, David, he paused. For the distance, for not being around more. We could have reached out to each other sooner, David said. How bad is it? Well, that is part of the reason I am here. All Might reached into his bag and slid a folder over. There is nothing more conventional medicine can do, my only option is the artificial, but nothing currently on the market can help. And what about one for all? David said as he began to read over the file. Do not fear David, I remember the promise I made to you, All Might said. Well, it may have all been in vain, David sighed. She wants to be a quirkless hero, still at that. That is a difficult path, All Might said. She had been working out a lot, she emails asking me for tips and advice. But how is she going to work around not having a quirk? She and her friends are working on an exoskeletal suit Izuku Midoriya. David shouted, jumping to his feet. Who or what is Izuku Midoriya? All Might said, wiping the spilled drink off his pants. A friend of Melissa's, a boy I think they are sweet on each other. But that doesn't matter, his quirk. With his quirk, he can solve this problem. David picked up the folder. Is his quirk some sort of amazing hidden healing type? All Might said, curious as to what had David so excited. No, it is technology-based, Tashi, his quirk, allows him to make anything. All we have to do is put him in a room with the supplies and he can make what we need. David said excitedly. You mean to tell me this child can create anything and he is building a suit for Melissa? Tashi was stunned. How did you think they would fail? I didn't expect them to, I just set such incredibly high bars that whatever they came up with would almost guarantee Melissa's safety. I have had to be unnecessarily demanding of them for that reason, David sighed. But yes, he doesn't even need the materials, but since we have him designing artificial organs, we need to make sure he has access to everything he could need, David said, talking very fast. I will just get Lab 2 activated and he can access everything from there. But are you sure he will help? All Might said, trying not to allow his hopes to rise too high. I could manipulate the situation, but I won't need to. He is a good kid, him and his friend May. David smiled. If you tell him the truth and we allow him to keep the rights for the organs and whatever else he figures out, I am sure that should be more than amenable. I can talk to him later, they stay with Melissa for the summer. How long? All Might said. I don't know if he has what he needs. From my understanding, the process goes very fast, so by the end of the week, they should be ready to go, David said with a smile. They may not get you back into fighting shape, but it should allow you to begin to recover and find a successor. Let's meet with him tonight then, though I feel strange asking such a thing of, but a young man, All Might sighed. Meeting All Might. Momo departed back home after the group had a chance to eat and walk around, taking in some of the shops near the beach. A schedule of sorts was set with them to work on Melissa's suit during the week, Momo's problems on the weekend and of course, try to hang out and have some fun. After they found out about her jaw-dropping quirk, all May could do was sit there shaking Izuku. When she finally did speak, all May said was Kyber crystal. Everyone went silent. I can't make something without knowing the chemical compounds. Momo said silently as visions began to form in her head. Melissa looked at Izuku, her eyes pleading. But if Izuku can figure it out. Oh, I am going to figure this out, he whispered. I have to. This essential matter dominated the conversation until Momo left. May got the perfect picture of Melissa and Izuku kissing her cheeks and the light candles of the birthday cake. She was delighted to sit and snuggle as they watched some of her favorite sci-fi movies. It didn't take too long for the film to be forgotten, as you had three hormonal teenagers who just discovered the joy of kissing and had just decided to be in a relationship together so soon, who had times for movies when there was kissing to be done and maybe some touching, over the clothes of course. Of course, the knock came at the door when the birthday girl was kneeling on the center of the couch. She and Melissa were kissing, Izuku was kissing her neck and his hand was on her stomach, inching upward. At the sound of the knocking, they all jumped away from each other, with Izuku falling off the couch. Then the girls laughed, Melissa, stumbling to the door, wiping a tear from her eye. She opened it and yelled. Uncle Might. Izuku scrambled to his feet, May leaped over the couch, and sure enough, standing there hugging Melissa was All Might. And David, but All Might. Hello young ones, I hope we are not intruding on your celebration. All Might suppressed a laugh when May and Izuku shook their head vigorously. I did bring a signed photo for the birthday girl and some limited edition clothing as I heard you were both big fans. Once the adults came in and ate a piece of cake, the mandatory photo was taken with number 1 and the actual topic for the visit was brought up. Uncle Might, what are you doing here? I didn't know you were coming. Melissa said, handing him a bottle of water. That is part of why we came over this evening, David said. Please, David, allow me. All Might leaned forward, his elbows on the table. I ask that what we discuss here be kept between us. I can't have this information going public. Of course, Uncle Might, Melissa said, reaching to touch his hand. Izuku and May both assured the hero that they wouldn't disclose anything. A few years ago I was injured, All Might said. It was quite severe and nearly cost me my life. Melissa put her hand to her mouth. As a result, I may not be able to continue as the symbol of peace much longer. What do you mean, All Might? Izuku asked. There was a puff of smoke and there was no longer the strong symbol of peace, instead, a skeletal man was in his place wearing his clothes. Oh my god, Uncle Might. Melissa managed to say. The freak. May yelled. Izuku was silent. What you see now is me, the skeletal All Might said. I can no longer maintain my other form for more than a few hours a day, and with every passing day that time limit seems to shorten. He slowly lifted his shirt, Melissa felt the tears forming. In the battle, I lost one of my lungs, my stomach, a kidney, as well as most of my intestine. Melissa didn't say anything but walked over, wrapped her arms around her uncle, and cried softly on his shoulder. There is nothing modern medicine or healing quirks can do for me, All Might looked at Izuku. I came here to see my old friend David in the hopes that he knew of something in the way of artificial organs that could help me. Without a lung, your body isn't getting enough oxygen, no stomach, not enough nutrients, so your muscles are collapsing. You can survive on one kidney, Izuku said, looking at him. You want me to create artificial organs for you? Mr. Shield must have told you about my quirk. I did, Izuku, but you can understand why, David said. Yes, that is correct, young Midoriya, All Might said. I do not ask this lightly, I will compensate you. You will have access to every material we have, all the dates you need to make them, and you can retain all rights, patents, and everything. If you can do this, Izuku, not only would you be helping All Might, but once these are approved, all the other people are out there waiting for organs, and you can save millions of lives, David's voice wavered. Izuku looked at both men and then at Melissa's crying, pleading face. Okay, he said, getting to his feet. Take me to the lab. Izuku, May said, grabbing his hand. What about Melissa's suit? The fabrication program will take a few days, you and Melissa must finish Icarus. You have finished the flight program already, Izuku squeezed her hand. I know you can handle that, then just work on the repulsor system. Izuku looked at David. Mr. Shield, I would like your permission to date your daughter. David stopped and looked at Melissa. It is not my permission you need but hers, David said with a smile. But I appreciate you asking me. What is it you require as compensation? All Might said looking at the boy. Help train Melissa and a new friend of ours, they want to be pro heroes someday, Izuku replied. Give them some pointers, offer some advice, Izuku shrugged. Mom went into support because my mom told me I could help more people this way, I could help heroes as well. Maybe give us a shout out if the opportunity arises. It would be an honor to help you. All Might smiled. This boy has a good heart and his values are in the right place. It would be wrong to take him from support. Taking him from support would be a disservice to the world, and I promised David I wouldn't pass one for all to Melissa, he thought. Thank you young Midoriya. All Might. All Might watched as David explained a few things to Izuku before he exited the lab. He saw Melissa and May kiss his cheek before they stepped out. He saw the boy look around, then crack his knuckles. He watched as Izuku sat in front of a computer and closed his eyes for a second, then Izuku just started going to work. All Might didn't have much of a clue as to what he was doing, but it was fascinating to watch. When everyone joined him, he looked at May. Do you know how his quirk works? May's gaze was transfixed on the screen. He explained that if he thinks of what he wants, his quirk will take over and build it. He doesn't even need to know how, when he sometimes builds things in his sleep, he has to reverse engineer to figure out how he did it. But since his quirk also tells him how machines work, even how to counter them if need be. May pointed to a computer. It is running a program we designed, it is an auto blueprinter, and it records what he is putting, and where before we would have to watch a video like this to help figure stuff out. He does it in his sleep sometimes, Melissa added. It seems the limit sometimes is what he has available, but even then, it would adapt. The problem is once he starts, it won't stop. It is beautiful to watch, May said as she leaned on Melissa's shoulder. Does he need to have an understanding of the sciences involved? David asked. No, Melissa answered. Izuku could pump out anything he wanted that way, but he doesn't, he works at it. The girl sat there for a few hours before leaving the room to go to bed, they had work that needed to be done. Izuku trusted them to finish certain things, and they wouldn't disappoint him. Melissa patched a feed into her room so they could still watch him. By the fourth day, May was on the verge of freaking out when she saw him smile and lie down on the floor. She bolted from where she and Melissa were working, yelling for Melissa to grab liquids. May lifted his head and placed it in her lap as Melissa helped her get him to drink some water. All Might lifted him and carried him to his room, as May instructed. They ensured his bedside had food, water, and sports drinks. He would wake up, eat, drink, maybe stumble to the bathroom and then fall asleep. In a moment of clarity, he told May and Melissa, who happened to be there, that the tests could not be interrupted. Momo had messaged the girls when Izuku didn't respond, concerned that she had upset him in some fashion, but they told her that he was using his quirk to create something important, so he would be out of contact for a bit. Melissa told her that she had found a trainer willing to help them both get ready to get some training for heroics. Every day after working all day in the lab, Mr. Yagi, or Skeletal All Might, would be putting both girls through their paces in the gym and sparring. They both would stumble home to their respective beds and fall asleep immediately. He assigned Momo quirk training exercises to do during the day. David was staring at the things in front of him. He looked over the blueprints, which were all encrypted, there were more than just artificial organs here. David watched as the machines in the lab were still running tests and all sorts of things. The sixth day. May and Melissa were happy when they came into his room and found the linen from his bed stripped and him emerging from the bathroom freshly showered. The fact that he was bare-chested was just a bonus. He just slipped on a shirt as they headed out the door to the lab. David and All Might met them there, and the kids were surprised to see an older woman there as well. She is a short woman with gray hair styled into a netted bun. She has a large orange that pokes diagonally out of her hair to the left. She has a notably small nose, eyes, and long mouth with defined nasolabial folds. My doctor, Chiyoshu Zenji, better known as Recovery Girl, All Might said with a smile. It is an honor to meet you, May and Izuku said in unison, bowing to the woman. Nice to meet such youngsters with nice manners, Chiyo said with a smile. Now, would you mind explaining these devices you have created? Yes, ma'am, Izuku responded. Before I do, I need a blood sample from All Might to have the connectors and artificial sheath begin to replicate. All Might looked at Chiyo, who nodded and extracted the sample as requested. As you know, the problem with any transplant is that when you introduce a foreign item into the body will begin to attack it, Izuku said as he waited for the sample. Once it was in hand, he went to the computer and started typing. The two vats he injected the sample into a machine and the vats of liquid began to flow together. The artificial organs were now suspended in the first liquid, a pale green. The second liquid, a neon blue, flowed into a device that had sprung to life when everything began working. This requires the recipient to be placed on a lifetime of anti-rejection medication and antiviral. Izuku was walking around adjusting things and looking at different computers. Not ideal for a hero. He smiled as a green membrane began to form over the artificial organs. That membrane will mask the organs, preventing the recipient's body from attacking them. All Might's body will think they are his, while in this other vat, artificial connections are being created to allow you to attach these devices more easily. Once you connect them, they will continue to grow like a sleeve and fuse with the connected tissue. You won't even have to do that as soon as I create nanotech. You can place the organs and they will form your connections. Izuku kept walking around, hitting different buttons. How do you know this will work? Chiyo said. I quirk built them, Izuku said confused. Did no one explain it to her? May quickly filled in the gap. On the other hand, David said, can you build nanotech? May and I have been working on it off and on, Izuku looked at Melissa. I hope to have it by the time she gets to UA. I wanted to be able to create her suit so she doesn't have to put it on or go to get it. That way, it is always with her, but she will have the support gear to keep things at bay while the suit gets to her. That made David smile. How do you feel about your deadline? I believe that Melissa and May were able to get as far as I think, then I estimate we should have the suit ready in about 3 weeks, testing and debugging, 2 weeks, and that will leave us 1 week before the deadline. Interesting, Chiyo mused. I will have to run tests to check compatibility, that can take some time. I need to scan the organs and sort the data. Can I take a sample of the sheath? Izuku handed her a metal block-looking device. May's eyes lit up, and to his surprise, so did Chiyo's. Is this? Chiyo whispered. When she flipped it open, she giggled with excitement. This is a tricorder. Mai was looking at the device, jumping up and down with excitement. You made it. Now seemed as good as a time. I had access to the resources needed for all this stuff, Izuku smiled. Melissa was looking at the vats. What is in the vats? Exactly. Are they artificial cells? Izuku shook his head. They are unstable molecules that can program to simulate the cells of the sample, or I can also use them to create a suite that will allow Momo to use her quirk and not be naked. They hide the artificial organs from the body like a cloaking device. So you could create a suite for Midnight removing her need to tear her clothing? All Might asked. What about a boy who phases, his clothes fall off whenever he uses his quirk? Chiyo said as she was scanning May with the tricorder. Oh, that boy from the sports festival. May said, that was funny. Yes to both questions. Not only that, clothing will protect from attacks as well, elemental extremes, all sorts of things, Izuku replied. They won't replace armor or anything like that. But add an extra layer of resistance. Can I take this to run some tests? Chiyo held up the tricorder. If it does everything I think it does, I will endorse it and help fund it being made and put into production. It would allow for field diagnosis or just in a hospital setting, a nurse could use this to help the more serious patients be treated first. I would be honored, Izuku said with a bow. Send me your data on the organs. I still want to run a physical sample of the membrane for my peace of mind to compare it to the tricorders for testing. Chiyo turned to All Might. I wouldn't want to risk these things being damaged in transport. If they check out, we should do the surgery here. I agree, thank you young Midoriya. All Might shook the boy's hand as the adults left the room. You know, if you integrate the tricorder into that orb, May said with a smirk. Let's call Momo and see if she wants to hang out, Izuku said with a smile. That sounds good, but first, why don't we go back to my room and make out for a bit? She grabbed May and Izuku's hands, leading away for a bit of fun. Izuku took a deep breath and stared at the image of Daiki, Hana, and his mother on the screen. Mr. and Mrs. Hatsume, he bowed his head. I would like your blessing to date May. The mothers' faces were neutral, but they grabbed each other's hands under the table. I tried to stay away like you asked, sir, but it hurt us both. I didn't realize how much I was hurting May till after we got into an argument before we came to the island. He raised his head to look at them. I mean no disrespect by asking this, but May is my partner, she is my constant. She is my past, present, and, God willing, my future. I wouldn't be where I am today without the Hatsume family. Daiki wanted to go into overprotective mode internally, but he knew it was just him being a father. Izuku was a good kid, he looked after May and knew he cared about her. It was inevitable since the day he came into their lives, the way they were attached at the hip, how they were moving towards the future so fast. Izuku had also changed their lives, the money from their invention stabilized their lives. The bank account with his daughter's name on it was already an excellent start for her life and was set to boom even more when the EVAs went on sale. That wasn't even considering whatever they were building on the island. He knew they were building a suit for Melissa, but even he was unsure of the scope or what it entailed. Do you love her? He asked. Yes, sir, Izuku responded with an unconscious smile. Then make sure you keep her safe, Daiki said. You take good care of my little girl. I will, sir, I promise, Izuku bowed. I will make sure we call you tomorrow, I just wanted to talk to you alone first. We look forward to it, Hana said. I love you, Izuku, Inko added. Love you too, Mom, he said, reaching out to end the call. Hana reached out and placed her hand on Daiki's shoulder. You did very good, Henny. I am so proud of you. Yes, Daiki, thank you for blessing him, Inko said. Daiki smiled as the women began to discuss the wedding they had been planning for years. Lab 2. Okay, I need you to strip and get into the chamber, Izuku said from behind a monitor. Ad. Momo said, her hands wrapping around her chest protectively. I don't think that is appropriate, Izuku. She said, shocked. Why? He responded, not looking up, you have to be naked so I can form and program your suit for you. Oh, she said, finally understanding. But are you going to be able to see me? She couldn't contain her blush. Izuku finally looked up, saw her blushing like crazy, and realized his words. And no. I can't see you, only your head, feet, and everything else will be covered. The wave of relief that washed over Momo was visible. Izuku started blushing as his mind filled with very inappropriate thoughts. He noticed that these thoughts came easier and faster since that day in the tub with May. It wasn't helped by the fact that every night Melissa, May, and him would sit on a couch, watch something and start kissing. Then there was last night when May was topless and he was worshipping her breasts and Melissa's hand was down his pants. As this image played through his mind, the thought of Momo on his other side nearly made him blue screen. He swore his extra appendage was slowly taking over his mind. How about you step in with your clothes on and I will take a picture so you can see. He said quickly. Momo stepped in and they closed the door. Izuku walked around, taking a video so she would feel assured. Izuku didn't know that when the machine powered up, it would give him a silhouette of Momo that would invade his thoughts. He decided not to mention that part of the process, instead doing his best to focus on the task at hand. It wasn't a difficult task instead, it was relatively easy. Once Momo was covered in the goop, he began bonding the unstable molecules. For Momo, it was like being submerged to her neck in a cold bath, but she felt it begin to warm up as the process started. It wasn't warm, but at least it was no longer so cold that it made her teeth want to chatter. She marveled at the whole process. When Izuku had finally contacted her, a relief had washed over her that she hadn't been abandoned. Yes, the fact that they were working on stage 1 to help her secure her dream of pursuing heroics was nice, but she never had friends before. While she was sure she wasn't classified as such by the trio, she knew that was the direction in which they were moving. It worked better with Melissa as they trained together physically almost every day. She was a little sad when their trainer had to depart for a while, but he kept in touch through emails about their progress. Momo never fancied herself an inventor till they started getting together to work on the sphere. She marveled when she brought over the prototype that Izuku deftly retrofitted to be able to be charged, all the while talking with them. May was at the board writing down suggestions and rough sketching the schematics. But with this free flow of ideas, Momo was enthralled as they would build on each other's ideas, adding and subtracting as they went along. Her mind was pulled back to the present when she felt the submersion fade. She looked down as the strange goo drained out and she was in a tight red suit with black gloves and boots. A simple belt was around her waist with various pouches attached. She did some twists and bends in the tube, making sure the best she could that nothing was unseemly or poking out. She must admit that the suite felt comfortable, warm, breathable, and flexible. Momo stepped out to see Izuku smiling. Okay, try to make a staff come out of your hand, he called out. Hesitantly, Momo looked at her hand and began the process. She let out a victory cry when it came forth without tearing her suit. Izuku couldn't find the words when he saw her smiling and excitedly jumping as Russian nesting dolls emerged everywhere. Once she regained her composure, she blushed and coughed into her hand. So, how do I take it off? You remove the gloves and boots like normal. There is a zipper on the back of this model. It is just a basic suit, more proof of concept, he responded. I thought we would have pants and a top combo for your suit. Melissa would probably be the best person to ask about design and things like that. So we can custom design it. Am I going to have to go back in the goo whenever we need to make changes? She said, doing some stretches. She was happy when he said no. Can I wear undergarments with this? She blushed. Izuku nodded his head vigorously, telling her that she most definitely could. He blushed and looked away. Momo took a deep breath, ran over, and hugged Izuku. Thank you so much, Izuku, I mean it, thank you. Izuku hugged her back. You're very welcome, Momo. The door opened to the lab as Melissa and May entered. Are we doing hugs now? May shouted, running over to join in the hug. Melissa smiled as they all looked at her. She shook her head but walked over to be pulled into the group hug. Spicy time. Girl time. Melissa couldn't stop the electricity that ran through her body as May was across from her in the bath. Their legs were scissored against each other as they moved their lower half against each other. Their moans filled the bathroom as they worked their way towards climax. Melissa had tried to explain to May that maybe taking a bath together was not wise, but like a bulldozer through wet tissue paper, May blew past those protests leading to this. "It feels so good when you rub against me like this," May moaned out. "Oh God, May, oh God," Melissa responded. Don't stop moving." May and Melissa were lost in the haze of pleasure as they edged closer and closer to that edge of release. May's moans began to increase, turning to screams as she ground harder against her lover. This had the same effect on Melissa. When May's scream of "oh sweet Megatron" erupted, the knowledge that filled Melissa that she had helped to bring May to orgasm sent her over the edge. Melissa's legs began to quake and tremble, her core locked up, her arms stiffened, and she could only grip the sides of the bath in desperation as her mind went blank. It kept building throughout her body, building and building. She didn't know if she cried out for May not to stop or only thought it. May's cry to Megatron was her trigger. Suddenly, her body spasmed and the tension was finally released. The sudden feeling of her entire body letting go washed over Melissa. A pleasure that she had never felt, not even on the nights she would slip her hand between her legs when tormented with lustful thoughts, nor when the secret toy under her bed would find its way to her most sacred of places. Everything before paled to this release, stars or maybe whole galaxies danced through her mind as she felt it flow out of her. Once she regained her senses, she looked across and saw a blissful haze on May's face. Slowly, reluctantly, they disentangled. Melissa crawled over to May and she began to kiss her girlfriend hungrily and passionately. Melissa slipped her hand between May's legs. May squirmed and moaned as Melissa worked her towards another climax. It didn't take long for May to reach the edge again and dive into the release her girlfriend had brought her. Once they had their senses back, they lay there in the tub, rejoicing the warmth and softness of the other. May suddenly pushed herself up, her eyes wide. "Holy shit, I got it." She scrambled out of the tub and ran off. Melissa scrambled after her and had to tackle May from running out of the room naked and wet. Spicy time over. UA. Tashi's eyes fluttered open as he stared at the hospital room ceiling in the UA. As he did so, he felt this rush of air into his lungs, the likes of which he hadn't felt in years. He looked to his side and saw Chio standing there smiling. "How long was I out?" he asked. "About a week," she responded. "We had to make sure that everything was functioning properly." "Well?" he asked hesitantly. "Everything is working perfectly as far as we can tell," she smiled. "It is a marvel of technology. That boy just revolutionized organ transplant in 6 days." She took Tashi's hand. "You will want to run and test everything, but we must go slow. So for now, I want you to stay in bed and we will have you try eating something." "A hamburger," Tashi said, his eyes wide. "I want a hamburger." "One hamburger coming up," she said as she exited the room. Tashi sat in bed and felt terrific. His body had been in a constant state of pain since the injury. He had forgotten what it was to be pain-free. He nearly wept at the new lease on life he had been given. He had almost perished that day, though he laid all for one low, he had nearly died, and with him, one for all. Even after that day, he knew he needed to find a successor, but he still hadn't done so. His argument with his old sidekick, Sir Night-Eye, had soured him to the point where he was just being stubborn. But he was given this fantastic second chance by contacting David to tell him about what had happened. He sighed, his head falling back onto the pillows. As his gaze dropped to the nightstand, he saw his phone. He reached out and dialed a number by heart. "I didn't think I would ever hear from you again, All Might," the voice answered, clean, crisp. "The tragic thing that we both felt was that our last words to each other were in anger, Mirai," Tashi responded. "I would like to see you if you are amenable. Have you given thought to what I have said?" Mirai's voice was still crisp but softened at the edge. "I have." After a pause, Tashi said, "Things have changed and I would like to discuss these changes with you. I am in the surgical wing of the UA, please come when it is convenient." "I will be there in 2 days, Tashi," Mirai said as he disconnected the call. The simple act of eating a whole hamburger was so satisfying he wanted another, but as this was his first test of solid food, they had to see how the artificial organs would react. Tashi did laugh, though, as he felt his stomach rumble in a way he had only been able to dream about. When everything seemed to process cleanly, he did all he could to contain his excitement. It started with a simple walk, then a light jog around the track. When he felt the rush of drawing full breaths, it just happened. He suddenly went buff and raced around the track at full speed like a kid. He ignored the calls for him to stop, he couldn't. He didn't realize how many times he ran around the track when he finally did stop, all he could do was smile through the chastisement. Gio and Nezu decided, as they had told him, to maintain his form for as long as he could. In for a penny in for a pound, he thought. With a nervous energy, he watched the clock as it neared when he would either have to shut it down or forcibly extend it. He was hooked up to machines as they were getting all the readings they could, and when the timer beeped, he involuntarily shut his eyes. His body didn't shake, there was no tremble, instead, he felt this ache rushing through him. It was not painful, but this unfamiliar strain made itself aware. As quickly as he thought it went away, and he just felt like himself. The dark cloud that even he hadn't been aware of hanging over him drifted away like a summer breeze. Ultimately, he went 2 hours past his previous limit before he felt the slightest need to shut it down. Gio marveled at how well Tashi's body had adapted to the new organs. His quirk factor was rising again at an incredible rate, and all the tests she ran showed positive, if not miraculous, results. She ran every test the old-fashioned way, then with the tricorder, as things matched up, she wanted to dance about. Nezu just pored over all the data, the information provided by Chio on the organs, the tricorder, and Izuku Midoriya. Nezu read over the boy's quirk registry as he reached out to the boy's educators to get a feel for the lad. He was surprised when they not only mentioned Izuku, but gushed about his companion, Mei Hatsum. 2 notable inventors, he dived deeper junkyard support. He was familiar with them and their capture grenades, their washers and dryers. He had just installed those items last year, now, they were producing artificial organs and medical scanners to revolutionize hospital diagnosis and heroics. A simple device that would tell a hero of the injuries someone had sustained, allowing them to perform proper triage in the field. Then he was talking with Tashi and nearly had to pick up his jaw from the floor. They were building and designing a suit for Melissa Shield, intending to allow her to take center stage as a quirkless hero. He had to be there for the test, hearing about it secondhand would not do. True to his word, Mariah arrived 2 days after his and Tashi's phone call. When he entered the room, he was surprised to see how good Tashi looked. Tashi smiled at Mariah and asked a simple question. I have to know, Mariah. Has my future changed? He extended his hand out. The future doesn't change, Mariah said tiredly. Humor me, my old friend, Tashi chuckled. Mira stepped forward, touching Tashi's hand, and activated his quirk. The tall, lean, muscular man locked eyes with Tashi as his quirk foresight activated. Once it was done, Mirai stumbled back, shock evident. He smoothed his dark green and yellow stretched hair as he stared at Tashi. I don't know what you have seen, but has it changed? Tashi asked. It has, Mirai whispered, but how? Izuku Midoriya, Tashi responded. I went to talk to David. Lab 2. Mei came running into the lab, nearly bulldozing Izuku. Can we change out the power supply on the armor? She said, snuggling into his chest. What would we change it out to? He said, wrapping his arms around her. It is bulky, but it is the best we can do now. Not if we build this. She held up a diagram and schematic, then pulled him over to the table and spread it out. I was taking a bath with Melissa, Izuku filed that image away for later. She was giving me attention with her fingers, and let me tell you, she knows how to use those digits. File that away for later. I had this moment of clarity, which popped into my head. She pointed proudly at blueprint. Izuku scanned over the blueprint, slowly, his brain pieced it all together, his quirk firing off answers as he stared at it. Holy freak, Mei, he whispered. Mei, this. Oh my stars and garters, you are a freaking genius. This will not only power the suit, but we can power whole cities, clean, efficient energy. Will it work? Mei said, hopefully, her hands by her mouth like a chipmunk. Yay, he stammered out. What do you call it? He whispered, his voice carrying with it hints of awe and wonder. The arc reactor, she said proudly, staring at his face, fascinated at the look he gave one of her creations. This was one of her favorite moments when she would play something before him and he would just be memorized. It would have been easy for her to become jealous or feel inferior to him. His quirk was every inventor's dream, if he dreamed it, he could build it. If he just looked at it, he understood it, could disassemble it, and counter it. Then there were these moments when she would place her dream, her baby, before him, and she could see that look of wonder at what her mind had dreamed of. He pulled out a drafting pencil. May I? She nodded. If we take this and reroute it here, this value will change to this. Then we can take this portion and change it out for a titanium core. Stabilizing the output. Tripling efficiency, they looked at each other, both grinning like idiots, neither knew who moved first, but soon, there were no smiles, only their faces smooshed together as they kissed feverishly. She moaned as his big strong hands grabbed her roughly by the ass and lifted her onto the table, her legs wrapped around him as they made out on the table. This was a new development in the invention process, but they both greedily welcomed it. They pulled back breathless. Want to make a baby with me? She asked, her voice lustful and husky. Izuku blushed, his extra appendage was screaming yes louder than a power drill to the brain. May, when you say it like that, he managed to say as he looked down her overalls to her beautiful breasts. If this weren't about or for Melissa, I would have you take my overalls off right now and mark me as your woman now and forever, she responded, leaning forward and licking up the side of his neck. I want you so bad, my Izu. She once again kissed him till his knees wobbled before she pulled back, the look in his eyes was nearly the undoing of her sanity. The power drill springing to life in his pants was almost his. Arc reactor? He said with a slight whine. Arc reactor, she said, matching his level of regret. They slowly and reluctantly disentangled themselves. Now, let's make Melissa a new baby, she said. They both smiled and got to work. Soon, sexual tension and energy were being put into their work. They both just slipped into their familiar dance as they moved about and around each other in their tango of creation. They didn't even notice Momo and Melissa come walking in carrying from their workout, carrying takeout steak and frites from Momo's favorite place on the island. They were celebrating. Why a celebration? Momo stood before her parents in the red suit. May had handled adding a simple titanium weave cape to add extra coverage against gunfire. It connected at Momo's shoulder, but one side of the cape also connected to her wrist. All Momo had to do was activate a device in her glove and it sent an electrical current through the cape, causing it to solidify to act as a rigid shield. Momo and Melissa had been practicing putting on this demonstration for the parents. Momo took a deep breath, created a short sword from her hand, and began twirling about, producing weapons from various parts of her body. Melissa stepped forward and ran a blade across a standard piece of fabric, cutting it immediately. She then took a deep breath and ran it down Momo's chest. Her mother immediately wanted to cry out, but her father's face was stoic. Melissa grabbed and pulled at the suit, trying to tear it. Momo stuck her arm into the fireplace and held it there for a minute before she pulled it out and took off her glove to show she wasn't burned. The final thing they presented was the data run from inside the lab of Vigo and Aoi firing guns at the dummy to demonstrate their defensive capabilities. A different machine measures how much pressure a blade would exert to penetrate. They presented the data to her parents, showing that while not bulletproof from lower caliber weapons, it provided protection equivalent to a bulletproof vest. When the lights came up, Momo stepped forward. This is the prototype. It can be modified and, of course, will be redesigned, with a small amount of skin to be shown, and to add much needed style, Momo said with a small smile. Now for the second demonstration. The staff came in and cleared out the furniture, and Momo engaged in hand-to-hand combat with Vigo. Her parents knew it was no light spar as they made full contact. Bao knew that Vigo and Aoi would train Momo in hand-to-hand combat and that recently his daughter had started working out with Melissa Shield. He made sure to sign off on that arrangement, hoping to foster the relationship not only between Ms. Shield but with Mr. Midoriya and Ms. Hatsum. While he was slightly disappointed that they weren't attending the training as they were not going into the hero course, it was understandable. He was a bit dubious about Mr. Yagi, who appeared as the girl's trainer, but that was washed away when he presented his card as the personal assistant to All Might. It was apparent that Mr. Shield had pulled some strings to get this daughter as much help as possible, now extending to Momo. The determination and hard move his daughter put forth, seeing her so committed, would have been enough to make him agree on that principle alone, but he had to make sure that his concerns were addressed and adhered to. I was so proud of her Momo, even though Momo was battered and bloodied, but the show of will Momo displayed getting to her feet would forever be burned into her memory. She was proud to see that Vigo was breathing hard, his clothes torn, blood trailed from his lip, and his cheeks were bruised. She looked at Gao and was relieved when he said, "Enough." Both combatants stepped back and bowed. "As long as your determination never wavers from where it is now, and I continue to see your improvement, then you may pursue a career in heroics." Momo couldn't stop smiling or shedding tears, though both actions hurt. "Thank you, father." Her parents rose and bowed slightly to Momo and Melissa before they exited the room. Momo turned and hugged Melissa, who was jumping up and down in joy. Melissa couldn't help but let the exuberating feeling take over as they celebrated. Back to the lab. "What are they building?" Momo whispered as they set the food, dessert, and drinks down before walking to the drafting table. Melissa and she looked down at the schematic, turning it around so they could get a better look at it. "Is it some sort of power source?" "I think it is," Melissa said, studying the design. Melissa's eyes widened as her brain put it all together. She looked over at Momo's mouth, a gap, and saw the same realization coming over the heiress. "No freaking way," Melissa said, stepping back, stunned. "Melissa, is it even possible?" One of Momo's hands was over her pounding heart and the other was lightly over her mouth as she looked down at the blueprint and then at the two inventors, oblivious to their presence. All Melissa could do was nod her head at first. "I would tell you no, but with Izuku." Melissa looked at her boyfriend and was just dumbfounded. "That has Mei's name," Momo pointed out. "Maybe there are some notes from Izuku or corrections." "Mei had it almost there, and he just tweaked it to pull it over the finish line," Melissa whispered. She looked it over some more. "It is for the suite," she almost wanted to cry. "It is a power core for the suit." "The battery was the biggest sticking point," Momo said. "I remember him talking about it while working on the sphere. It was large and clunky, but it was the best they could do now." May just solved the problem. Izuku, we have been building it upside down. May said as she walked over and looked at the blueprint. What, that is impossible. He yelled as he turned around and saw Momo and Melissa standing there. May looked up at about that same time. Holy Optimus Prime. She screamed, jumping back. When in the name of Unicron did you two get here? About 5 minutes ago, Melissa said as a giggling Momo reached down and turned the blueprint around. Is this for the suit? May nodded as she sniffed the air. Food. Yes, I wanted to treat everyone, Momo beamed. My father approved of the suit and my fighting abilities and blessed me to pursue heroics. That is so freaking awesome. May yelled, running around the table and hugging Momo. Once it had been apparent that hugging was on the table, Momo was happy to find out that May was a hugger. Feed me, Momo. May said, sounding deeper like the man-eating plant she had seen in a movie the other night. It was part of a movie, she had no idea how it ended, what happened in the middle, or anything else. Izuku offered his congratulations. Looking at the device, he rubbed his chin. We can take a dinner break, he said, walking over to the sink to wash, May bouncing after him. Once they ate, Melissa asked a question she wanted to know and would regret for the rest of her life. May, when did you think of this? After you gave me that orgasm in the bath, you know, after we scissored, May said so simply without shame or regard for Momo. It was so good and everything was so clear, then boom, it popped into my head. May looked up to the sputtering tomato known as Momo. This is good, she commented and went back to eating. Momo looked at Izuku and did her best to reboot. We all are dating, he said sheepishly, focusing on his plate. They all, Momo managed to sputter out. Melissa, who was hiding her face in her hands, nodded. And you are taking baths together? Melissa nodded, and doing things. Momo's mind went to the scene in the bathtub, added Izuku, and went well beyond that. At the end of her fantasy, Momo was sitting watching the whole thing while they did things and she did things to herself. Then Momo's mind shut down. I hope everything works out well for you, Momo said once she rebooted. Like the others, she was solely focused on her food. The destructive force that May struck again. You should take a bath with us. May smiled. Melissa does the thing when she washes my hair. Oh, by the primes, is it magical? Momo shut down. Melissa was trying to get the earth to swallow her whole, and Izuku's unruly friend provided the image of all three girls in the bathtub, and he shut down. Dinner was quiet and a bit awkward that night. Testing day. Izuku and May went full throttle after they finished the arc reactor, as they worked on upgrading the power supply for the suit. Melissa and Momo did all they could after their training to help out. Momo was getting a crash course in electrical, mechanical, and programming, absolutely everything. And she loved every moment of it, getting her hands dirty and being in the middle of whatever she could lend a hand on, even if it were simply holding something for one of the others. She even got to spend the night one night. They worked exceptionally late, though she and the girls fell asleep, she still counted it as her first sleepover. Momo was smart and picked up things quickly when she got assigned a task and they let her do it independently. She was over the moon. She even ensured that dinner was ready and served at a set time, so Izuku and May didn't neglect to eat. It was late one night, 2 days before the test, when Izuku stepped back, his hands in the air. May hit some keys on the tablet and they all held their breath. They all turned to the big screen, watching all the checkpoints turn green. Each one made their hearts beat and soar just a little bit higher. When the final one turned green, they all gave a huge cheer. Melissa stepped forward and walked around the suit, staring at it in awe. The full-body armored suit sat on the rack, sleek and beautiful, blue trimmed in gold. Think the rescue armor. The gold mask shined like a mirror as she lightly ran her fingers down it, and the chest plate hummed with the glow of arc reactor. She felt the tears begin to slide down her cheeks as she stood looking at her dream. She turned and smiled at the group before she walked over and wrapped May and Izuku tightly and just bawled. Momo was about to step away when May grabbed her and pulled her in. You don't get to run away, May said. You were a big help down the stretch, we wouldn't have made it without you. Momo tried to protest, but May hushed her and pulled her in. You're a good friend. Momo melted as they told her the same thing. She had friends. She hid her face in someone's shoulder as a few tears of happiness slid down her cheeks. She offered a prayer to whatever god had put Izuku in her path. The next day, they all just relaxed. May and Izuku were exhausted. Momo enjoyed the lazy day, watching movies and eating snacks with her friends. The word would ring in her head when she thought about it or told her parents her plans for the day. I am going to spend the day with my friends. Not to mention when Melissa asked if she would be there for the test for moral support. Melissa woke early in the morning of the test, showered, and got ready as the butterflies in her stomach attempted to flee her body at every waking moment. She walked into the lab and saw Izuku and Mary checking everything. She smiled when they told her they had woken up in the middle of the night to check the systems before they could go back to sleep. Momo's arrival with breakfast was welcome as they all tried to eat, though they all lacked an appetite. When all their phone alarms beeped simultaneously, Izuku looked at Melissa and said, "It is time." Melissa stepped out, slipping into her bodysuit and vomiting in the toilet before she came out and stood before her destiny. Arms emerged from the pedestal, unlocking and opening the suite. All the pieces were suspended when Melissa stepped up and slipped her feet into the open boots. She nodded as Izuku gave the command, and it all started fitting around her body. Momo and Mei were filming, as were the cameras in the lab. The helmet slipped around the back of her head and the mask slid into place. Everything was dark. The machine's hum surrounded her, and then the tactical display came to life. "Hello Melissa," a warm, soothing voice rang in her earpiece. "Hello, Icarus," she replied. "Status report. Everything is operating perfectly, the weather forecast calls for clear skies and a temperature high of 92 degrees. Izuku, can you hear me?" she said a bit louder. "I hear you're fine. Are the external mix picking everything up?" Melissa gave him a thumbs up, smiling at the mechanical whir as her arm moved. "Run targeting and facial recognition." "Icarus, targeting and facial recognition," she commanded as information began to fill the screen. "But now, let's walk to the lift and get this show on the road," Izuku said. "We will see you topside," Momo called out. "You got this," Mei yelled as they exited the room. Momo and Mei rode the elevator to the testing area. Of course, they saw David and were surprised to see All Might, Recovery Girl, Sir Night-Eye, Inko, and Hannah. Oh, and the freaking principal of UA. Momo bowed deeply to their surprised guests. "It is truly an honor to be in your presence. I am Momo Yaoirozu." She then handed out data pads to the group. "We do apologize that some of you may have to share, as there are more people than we expected." Mei just smiled and said hello as she walked over to where all the monitors were set up and started streaming the telemetries. She got on the intercom, "So All Might, our mothers and the freaking principal of UA are here." "What?" Mel and Izuku replied. "So, no pressure," Mei said sarcastically. "Izuku, what if I mess this up?" Mel said, starting to panic. "Melissa, it is going to be fine, I promise," Izuku said calmly. "We have been preparing for this for years. After today, your dad will sign off on you going to the UA hero course and the principal will have no doubts about how well you can be a hero. Everyone is nervous when they are about to change the world." Melissa started to smile, "Then let's change the world." "Exactly," Mei chimed in. "Let's show the world that a quirkless girl can fly." When the lift arrived and Melissa stepped out, the sun shining off her armor was impressive. All Might smiled at his niece and the remarkable sight before him. The mothers also smiled as they looked at the armored girl and stole peeks at All Might. Nezu leaned forward and grinned. "Now, how does it perform?" he whispered. "Welcome, everyone," Izuku's voice rang out. "Today, we will display the Rescue Armor Mark I capabilities. The first demonstration of the suite's flight capabilities and aerial maneuverability will be. Around the airspace, several rings have been set up for Melissa to maneuver through. The flight path is clear. Melissa, it's time." Melissa turned as Izuku stepped back and opened her palms towards the ground. "Icarus, give me 10% thrust, map out our route and show them what we can do." "With pleasure Melissa." Melissa lifted off as the mothers cheered. She began with slow speed maneuvering around the field before she saluted the crowd. The repulsor roared to life and she shot off like a bullet. Mei and Izuku heard Melissa yell, exhilarating as she rocketed into the blue skies. She had worked this in simulation and some of the simple maneuvers in the lab, but outside, soaring through the sky was on an entirely different level. David and they watched as she soared around the island, flying through the obstacles. When she landed, it was time for the defensive display. They watched as Melissa was hit with flamethrowers, gunfire, and a simulated punch that sent her flying back. She used her repulsors to stabilize herself, landing on her knee, her arms behind her. No one could see the grin on her face when the targets for the offensive portion razed out the ground. When the smoke cleared, she stood proudly and saw All Might step forward. "I think I would like to see what you can do against a live opponent," he said, stepping in front of her. "But Uncle Might," she protested. "Don't worry, I won't break your suit," he teased before he leaned in. "It will be fine, I promise you. If you can do well against me, I will know you will be safe pursuing heroics. It is not only your father who worries about you and who loves you." "I understand," Melissa said, and he could hear the emotion in her voice. She stepped back and took up a boxer's stance, much like her uncle. "Don't cry to me when I beat you, Uncle Might. I will do my best to drown my tears in my cereal," he assumed his stance. "Now, my little niece, show me what you can do." Melissa immediately sprang forward with a right hook. All Might leaned back out of range and went for a left to the body. He was surprised when she caught him by the wrist and rocketed up with a knee strike that sent him stumbling back, his mouth bloodied. "That's my girl." He smiled as he came in at her. Melissa slipped past the jab, missed with her counter, and then got rocked by an uppercut. The clang echoed in the testing area. Melissa felt that, but she was out, it made her feel alive, and something awakened in her that day. She was in a fight, and she loved it. All Might came in again, with a lightning-fast combination to her body and then her head, sending her spinning around. She whirled down to her knee as the repulsor sprang to life, blasting him in the chest and sending him flying back. She rocketed through the air, spearing him through a cinder block wall erected as part of the presentation. He got his feet under him and dug in, stopping their momentum. To her surprise, he drove his elbow down into her back, pancaking her into the ground. He bent down to grab her by the waist to lift her for a slam, but her legs locked around his head and her repulsors fired as she flipped him over. Instead of putting her in a mounted position, he ate a right hook to the jaw and elbow that cut him above his eyebrow before he got his arms up to block the next attack. She brought her hands down in a double axe handle smash, only for them to be caught to her surprise as her uncle overpowered the suit, forcing her arms to fly apart. Then he delivered his smash to her chest, sending her tumbling off of her. She heard the armor crack from the blow, damage reports flooded her tactical display. All Might was airborne instantly, descending on her with a knee strike. Melissa quickly rolled back into a bicycle kick, catching him under the chin and rocking his head back. As she came to her feet, she pushed forward, landing several shots to his gut, doubling him over. She leaped up and cracked him again with a headbutt, placed both her hand on his chest point blank, and fired off the repulsor, sending him rocketing away and crashing through the remaining walls. Smoke filled the arena as she called for Icarus to get a lock on him. Once it did, she flew in to try and secure her victory. In the thrill of the fight, she forgot one thing. This wasn't just her uncle, this was All Might. She flew in hoping to spear him, but instead of the smoke came his massive fist in an overarching attack that collided perfectly in between her shoulder blades, and with such force, it bounced her off the ground. When she came up, an uppercut crashed into her chest right above the arc reactor. Sensors and alarms went crazy in her suite. He slid forward and grabbed her by both her boots, crushing the metal in his hands, and he pulled her overhead, slamming her into the ground. Mei and Izuku winced at what he was doing to the suite, but they knew this data would be invaluable in the long run. Melissa's head rattled, causing her to see stars. She tried to use the repulsor in her hands to create some space, but they yanked her back. His fist stopped an inch from her helmet. She looked up and saw him smiling, his face a crimson maw. She knew he had won. "I yield," she called out. "How hard were you going?" she said as the helmet opened and she removed it. "It started at 10%, but you pushed me to double that," he said, pulling her up. "You did good, Melissa. I am very proud of you." "I take it." She looked at her uncle, worried. "Great, better than great," he said. "This wasn't just for you, this was also to see how I would hold up. And we are both still standing and walking." Then they turned and walked back to the grandstands, his arm around her shoulders and hers around his waist. As they got closer, they saw David standing there. All Might excused himself, walking over to the group as they were gathered around the other kids. "I want you to know that I would have never really stood in your way," David said. "I set the bar so high, Melissa, because I love you so much and I need to know that you will be as safe as you possibly can out there. I don't want to lose you the way I lost your mother. So promise me that this isn't the end, that you and your friends will keep creating, inventing, and improving that suit of yours so you can come home safe to me." Melissa hugged her dad and tears flowed from both of them. "I love you so much, Dad, so very much. I promise we will never stop improving. Thank you, Dad. Now come on, I am sure your boyfriend is worried about you," he teased. Melissa blushed. "I am sure he is, so is my girlfriend." David froze. "I am sorry. What did you say?" "I am not just dating Izuku, I am involved with Mei as well." Melissa took a deep breath. "I am bisexual, Dad." David rubbed the back of his head. "Okay," he said slowly. So he just shrugged. "I have nothing to add to that. Be careful and be careful. Melissa, I want you to know that I will always love you no matter what. I don't care who you love or are in love with, as long as they treat you right and you treat them right, that is all that matters to me." "Thanks, Dad," she said as they joined the group. "Congratulations are for you, my dear inventors," Nezu said as he leaped up to the control panel. "Am I a bear, a mouse, or the principal of the UA? I am most interested in sitting down with you both, and you, Monsieur Rozu. But worry not about that now, celebrate your accomplishments." When Melissa got there, she went over to receive congratulations from her friends. Izuku and Mei took her hand and looked at their parents. "Mom, this is Melissa, our girlfriend," Izuku declared. Mei nodded happily and kissed Melissa on the cheek. Hannah just started laughing, and Inko looked about ready to burst. It was Recovery Girl who made everyone break out laughing. "Ah, the vigor of youth, I remember those days." Everyone looked at her. "What? I wasn't always old." Chapter 6. Consequences. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Consequences. It would have been enough to draw unwanted attention just by making someone fly, to elevate someone to a higher power level, but to do so with a quirkless girl was a challenge that some would be eager to accept. On an island predicated on the development of technology, there was no way such a demonstration would have gone unnoticed. While specific answers may have eluded those watching, enough would be gleaned that interested parties would be willing to take higher levels of risk upon themselves. When setting about changing the world, few people stop to ask if they should, nor do they dare consider the backlash when they do. Up until now, Junkyard Support had updated the way people did laundry, provided and revolutionized the area of construction and salvage cleanup, was about to lift the area of household assistance to fantasy levels. And had assisted the world of law and safety with the introduction of their capture grenades. This excluded the creation of the world's first quirkless hero, artificial organs, hero costumes, flight control, AI, weapons program, medical diagnostics, search and rescue, and the breakthrough they were about to make with communications. Enough had already been done to draw attention, an armored suit flying around the island that may have been a giant neon sign, signaling that a new buffet had been opened. Nothing happens overnight. Well, that is a lie. Many things do, but it takes a bit of planning to eat at the buffet and take it for yourself. Factor in what is believed to be a limited window, some begin to overextend themselves, bringing in other parties whose views and desires do not align with the original party's desires. The desire for revenge for yesterday's perceived slights and failed product launches had ruined Omni support. Dr. Francis Baker made the error of contacting the syndicate. Once upon a time, the syndicate was a feared organization, with even those not within the organization claiming membership to tread upon their name. Now, to do so in folly would earn a deadly reprimand. Their folly was to run afoul of the genuine terror in the darkness and the symbol of peace. A brutal campaign was waged underground and above. As many historians and military commanders would tell you, engagement with two fierce enemies on two fronts would not only hasten your end, but ensure it. In that end, there was left a broken shell of the one who had started it all. They had lived while everything around them had been left in ruin. In their survival, they rambled and raved, their mad words of glory and revenge, tainting whatever hope their children would have of finding peace. It was from the ashes of this fallen empire that Christian's anther was raised. Words and dreams of yesteryear and a deep-seated desire for revenge, for the respect and glory that was once held. Desperate to bring back the syndicate, he had rebuilt them, he would bring them back, shake the world to its knees, and repair the crumbling walls of the once magnificent house he grew up in. Unlike those before him, he knew that the answer lay in technology, that finding or breeding the quirk necessary was unreliable. His opponents were lost in pure quirks, and he would rebuild the empire by combining them both. When Dr. Baker reached out, he saw the opportunity. Baker would be his pawn. In this one swoop, he would take the technology he needed to arm his new army, break the inventor whom Baker called for, and capture a nice trophy as well. All construction projects needed capital to begin genuinely, valuable trophies were just the way to generate that capital. Every resource, every penny, every ounce of blood, sweat and tears would be put forth. This operation was an all-in situation, failure would not be an option, there would be either glory or death after tomorrow. The night before tomorrow. After spending so much time on the island, Izuku didn't have to worry about being overwhelmed by his quirk nearly as much. The convention was hit and miss if it caused him a headache, and aside from the nerves he still got when they had to present, it was always an enjoyable time. This summer, though, would go down in his mind as the best, worst, most unforgettable summer. It was the defining summer of his life to this point, one that would shape and mold the rest of his life and those ladies who had become the suns upon which he orbited. Melissa, May, and slowly, Momo have been in this fixture since the night on the beach. With the training, Melissa and Momo were building a bond, one that was forged in the fire with blood, sweat, and the occasional tears. It helped them to become close, May and he, in the labs, a place so familiar and peaceful, now that the tension and problems had been removed. The group would spend mornings together, Momo and Melissa would leave after lunch, eat dinner most nights, and be teenagers. Momo was having the time of her life, she could relax with them, and there weren't any walls she needed to hide behind or erect between them. Momo found the love they all shared warm. Seeing how they all cared for each other and did simple things for each other made her drift to dreams of romance and the novels she would read before bed. May cuddling her on the couch made her feel warm, like when Izuku had fallen asleep and his head was in her lap. She couldn't help herself as she lightly ran her hands through his hair. The end of their summer was approaching, with none of them wanting it to end. Melissa, most of all, May and Izuku would return home together, Momo would be moving near them in preparation for the entrance exam, leaving the girl in a bit of a funk as her father told her she would stay home. It wasn't malicious. She understood when he said he just wanted more time with her before she ran off into the sunset to start her life and he wouldn't be there every day to watch over her. Plans were being made for special nights. Melissa wanted to give her first to Izuku before he left, make love to Mei, and enjoy the company of both. They were always experimenting and touching each other, moving closer and closer. It was on the eve of the Island Summer Festival that everything changed. The god of fate reminded them that payment was owed. The girls were all dressed in kimonos, just visions of beauty. Izuku took 2 whole minutes even to get a word out when they stepped out, his other brain was taking all the blood and didn't want to share. It had been decided that this would be a special night, that tonight Mei and him would be together. Mei and Momo would have a girls' night while this happened, so seeing them all looking so beautiful and the blush and nervousness that radiated off of Mei was doing things to them both. He nearly fainted when Mei whispered that she felt it was traditional not to wear anything under her kimono that night. The night carried with it that hint of magic, the promise of what was to come, and the festival was alive. The mix of tradition with the technology the island was known for brought this neon glow mixed with lantern light. They played games, watched a play, and ate all the food they could find. They laughed and smiled so much their faces hurt, the unseen blush when Izuku took Momo's hand to lead her through the crowd, the stolen kisses between the couple when something happened. And tomorrow it would all happen again, topped with fireworks, or a light and fire show extravaganza as it was billed. There was tension on the ride back as Mei and Izuku fidgeted, Melissa teased, and Momo blushed. When they separated, Mei walked away with Izuku, and the demureness she exuded, looking down and blushing, was so out of character for the rambunctious Mei they all knew. Melissa kissed both cheeks and whispered something to them as Momo stood apart, they nodded and kissed her back before they walked away. "Please forgive me if this is rude," Momo said as she walked towards Melissa's room. "But are you upset that they are?" Momo began to blush, unable to finish her sentence. "No, and yes," Melissa said. "We talked about this a lot, Izuku will only be a virgin once, he only has one first time to give." Well, Mei and Momo nodded. "Part of me wants to be the one that he gives it to, but they have loved each other for so long. Though they didn't know it, they fought unknowingly against it. Mei and I have our own first to give to each other, and we have. I love them and want to be with them, but this is a special moment we each need to share on our own. Izuku wasn't there for things Mei and I did, etc. But you love them both," Momo said as they entered Melissa's room. "And this is such an important moment, a special moment that you want to be there to share it." "Exactly," Melissa said with a faint blush. "It sounds much naughtier than I mean it, even to bear witness, to see that moment. But it is a private moment, I wouldn't want Mei there when I share it with Izuku. It is strictly for the two of us like this night is strictly for the two of them." "That does sound much naughtier than you mean it," Momo smiled, though her blush had deepened. "But I understand. If it were my first time, I wouldn't want anyone there, even if I had other lovers. I think that having special moments between you two is essential. Yes, you want to share everything with those you love, but there will always be unique things between just two partners." "Thinking of having multiple lovers, are you?" Melissa teased. "Well, I am an important woman, I need to make sure my needs are satisfied," Momo said with the air of a snobby debutante, making both of them laugh. "I believe we should get changed, grab some ice cream, and watch some movies." "That, my dear Momo, sounds like a perfect plan." Izuku's and Mei's morning started with the fulfillment of fantasy as they had sex in the bath, stripped the bed, and got dressed for their day. Mei was a little sore but happy, especially after waking in the cuddly afterglow of their night together. Lead payment. Mei was whisked away by Melissa and Momo, leaving Izuku to eat breakfast. He used this time to contact Recovery Girl and talk to her about her progress on testing the tricorder. Recovery Girl gushed over the data and the unit's capabilities. She then told him the magic word she wanted to support being registered for hero support and hospital use. He had to argue with her about receiving a percentage as her name attached to the tricorder would add a monstrous boost for the device, way more than the name Junkyard Support. Maybe they need to workshop a name for their medical division and the other things they did. Junkyard Support would still be there, but it would sound better if something you put into your body didn't have the word junkyard attached. He was still talking to Recovery Girl when all hell broke loose. "I will send you a few more tricorders for field testing." The building was suddenly rocked by an explosion. "Izuku, what was that?" Recovery Girl said. Izuku had barely managed to avoid being knocked from his seat. Then the alarm sounded. "Attention all personnel, code 01, this is not a drill." A robotic voice rang throughout the facility. "Izuku, what is a code 01? Recovery Girl shouted. "Hostile forces," Izuku said, getting to his feet. "I have to go. I need to get the girls. I will radio it in and inform All Might," she yelled. She was about to say something when his screen wavered and suddenly became static. His quirk told him the answer. They were being jammed. Momo was blushing and giggling as Mei shared the story of her night with Izuku. They were enjoying a big breakfast when the explosion knocked Mei down. Melissa and Momo managed to hold onto the table. Instinctively, Momo grabbed her phone and sent her distress code. Melissa went to Mei when the announcement rang out. "We are under attack," Melissa said to the unspoken question. "Izuku," Momo yelled. The girls nodded as they ran out of the room. They heard gunfire erupting everywhere. Izuku came scrambling around the corner, opening a panel in the wall and typing in a code, and the blast shutter came slamming down. That is when they saw him holding his arm and blood seeping through his fingers. "Izuku, oh my god," Melissa yelled as the girls rushed to him. Momo began to create a bandage as quickly as we could. "It grazed my shoulder," he said, getting to his feet. "They are jamming all communications." He winced as Momo bandaged his arm. "We can't stay here," May said. "We need to get to the fallback safe room." "Can't we go out the window?" Momo said. Another explosion rocked the building. They stumbled back to Melissa's room and were about to open it when they heard the blast door behind them begin to lift. Melissa's door burst open, knocking Melissa and May to the floor. Two men in black bodysuits with military vests and rifles burst into the hall, targets acquired. They heard them call out. Momo created a baton and swung at the man closest to her. He deflected the attack with his rifle and went to use the butt of the gun to stun her. She tilted her head back, and as another baton sprang to her hand, she went low and connected with a bone-cracking blow to the man's knee. Izuku saw the second begin to lower his weapon at Melissa and May. He sprang forward and speared the man back into Melissa's room and then crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Izuku clawed at the man's face, ripping the googles free. A stiff elbow knocked him to the side. He tried to get to his feet, but the trained fighter was faster and landed a solid kick to Izuku's ribs. He reared back to deliver another kick when Melissa landed a flying knee to the side of the man's head. She crashed to the ground with him scrambling to try and take the man back, but she was outmatched. Izuku regained his senses, seeing Melissa desperately fighting with the man. He came in with the best right hook he could muster. The headsman jerked to the side, his guard faltered, and Melissa slipped in the choke and cranked for all she could. Izuku punched the man again, grabbing his arms and preventing him from defending himself against Melissa's attack. The man Momo was attacking fell to the ground in a scream of pain. Momo went to try and land a knockout blow, but in her haste, she almost didn't see the knife before it was too late. She barely managed to move her leg away as it cut across her thigh, sending her tumbling. He attempted to bring the knife down into Momo's leg. She swung her baton, knocking the blade free and making the man scream again. May grabbed the strap holding the man's rifle that had swung to the man's back. Grabbing the rifle, she put one foot on his back and yanked the strap back around the man's neck. The man's eyes went wide, but Momo put him to sleep with a strike across his jaw, breaking it. Izuku took the rifle from the man looking at it and walked towards Melissa's balcony. His eyes widened and he grabbed Melissa's hand. We got to move, he yelled. May heard Izuku yelling. She saw the blast door lifting higher, grabbing what she hoped was either a flashbang or smoke. She pulled the pins and threw them as Momo grabbed her, hearing Izuku yell to run. They barely made it a bit past Melissa's door when a loud explosion threw them to the ground, accompanied by the explosion of two flashbangs, leaving their ears ringing. Momo got May up, Melissa and Izuku stumbled to their feet and Izuku brought the rifle down the hall. More coming, he shouted. Melissa looked both ways and both sides surrounded them. The lab, she shouted. They stumbled into the lab. Melissa slapped the emergency lockdown function as they heard shouts for them to stop. May looked around, grabbing a giant wrench. Melissa, get to the armor, she yelled as Izuku and Momo backed away from the door. Have you ever fired a gun before? Momo asked, her heart pounding in her ears. No, but I know the mechanics. Right now, I don't think that matters too much, he said, breathing hard. May ran over to the console and began the boot up sequence. Momo, there is a suit for you, it's the original. Momo nodded. She needed protection. She ran toward where she knew it was stored, stripping out her clothes as quickly as possible. Modesty be damned, she thought. Izuku ran over to another table. Looking at about a half dozen orbs, he grabbed the tablet and began to boot them up. The first bang on the door made them all freeze for half a second. Melissa pulled on her bodysuit just as Momo finished doing the same. The two girls looked at each other and then at Izuku and May. Momo and Melissa at least had some training, but May had a bit of self-defense, and May's dad taught Izuku boxing lessons. They knew that they had to defend those two at all costs. Izuku, can you bypass the jamming signal? Melissa yelled out, climbing into her armor. Not from here, he yelled. It is on the roof, he called back. She could see a look of panic cross his face. Then he stopped and grabbed a paper. She watched as he took a deep calming breath and started to draw something. Lock and load, Mel, May called out. Everything is green. May then ran to a storage locker and pulled out some capture grenades. The banging against the door was getting louder, and as Melissa's display came up, she could see a heat buildup on the other side of the door. One of them has a fire quirk, and they are melting their way in, she called. We have 3 minutes, Icarus answered. 3 minutes, Melissa yelled. She saw Izuku wobble and then look at the paper. "Momo," he yelled. She ran over and looked at the paper. Momo bit her lip. "I don't know, Izuku, maybe 5 minutes," she said. "Mel?" Izuku called out. "I need 2 minutes, baby." "Then you will have 2 minutes," Melissa said as her armor came to life. Icarus scanned the lift for explosives. "The shaft is rigged to blow," Icarus responded. "Freak." Melissa cursed, relaying the information. "May," Izuku yelled. "I need the jumpers, the sonic emitters, and your small surprise balls." May just nodded and ran to grab the things. Momo focused on creating what Izuku had asked for, and Melissa knocked over some tables, making some cover for them to hide behind. Once May got everything Izuku needed, she ran to the mainframe and began typing in commands. "Freak you, protocols are initiated," she yelled to Izuku. "They are not getting the VATS or the molecules. They are flushing as we speak, data downloading to backup." "What are they after?" Momo said aloud. "You, me, Mel, May," Izuku responds frantically, working on something. "They said targets were acquired, they could be after 2 or all 4 of us. I was on the phone with Recovery Girl when it all started. She was going to radio in before we lost communication. We need to hold out until then." Izuku knelt next to Momo. "You make sure they get out," Momo's eyes widened. "Izuku," she protested. "Momo, promise me you will do everything possible to save them. If it comes down to them or me, you choose them," he said fiercely. "Please, Momo." "I promise, Izuku," she said. "I have imagined there are 18 of them out there and something else, a large device of some sort," Melissa said. "Icarus can't identify it." "I know I am working on it," Izuku said, muttering a curse as he continued to work. May ran over as he said a few words. She nodded and got to work on the second module. "Icarus, what would happen if we fired a full repulsor blast at the door 20 seconds before they came through?" Melissa asked. "The molten steel would go outward, disabling at least 5 members of the assault team. The damage would be severe if not most certainly fatal," Icarus responded. "If I were going to come after us, I would only be interested in Momo and Izuku, they may kill May," Melissa muttered. "I do not find fault in your conclusion," Icarus said. "Power it up," Melissa commanded. "I will surprise them, be prepared," she told her team. Melissa braced as the repulsor came to full power, and she fired. The screams were immediate. As she leaped through the opening, a hail of bullets bounced off of her. She aimed and fired her blasts down the hall as smoke pellets fell from her armor, filling the hall. Melissa did her best to use the smoke to her advantage. They couldn't see her, but she could see them thanks to her targeting display. She barreled into the first person she found spinning and used him like a club against his allies before throwing him down the hall toward the unknown device. She heard the person bounce off of some protective shield around the device. Suddenly, a woman burst through the smoke, spearing Melissa back. She stabilized and brought both hands down, but the woman kept driving her back. Melissa started to unleash punches into the woman's sides, then, a double smash finally broke her attacker's grip. Melissa grabbed the woman's hair and drove her knee into her face. She heard a scream of pain, but the second knee silenced it. She looked and saw a few of the attackers about to throw some grenades into the room. She fired, detonating them in midair, and chaos was raining down. May and Izuku flinched at the sounds and explosions, but they kept working. They saw a group of soldiers about to try to get in, only for Melissa to go barreling into them, knocking them away. Gunfire erupted, they both focused on their task. Momo didn't falter, not even when an explosion rocked the lab from the lift area. May and Izuku dropped behind the cover as they heard people entering the lab. Izuku fired blindly toward that area, and after some time, the returning hail of bullets sent him scrambling. He threw himself over May as fragments and glass broke all around them. May huddled under him and kept working. "Don't stop," he told her. "When Momo is finished, insert the cells into the center and button them up. After that, activate and call it out." May just nodded her head. Izuku could hear the footsteps getting closer. He grabbed the capture grenades and threw them over their barrier. He listened to some yells, but then they became muffled. He grabbed the wrench and broke from cover, seeing one of the attackers only partially immobilized. He swung, and the sound of a metal meeting skull was heard. "Contain and disable," he yelled. The orb sprang to life and flew towards their new attackers. Melissa was thrown back when a ball of force collided with her. She got to her knee when she saw her attacker hurl a yellow ball at her. She rolled to the side, firing another blast, and the attacker slipped past, flinging more balls of force. Melissa dodged one, but it led her to the second one. She could see the man grin as the other man came in, his hands wrapped in a white glow, they weren't clenched like a fist. She swung down in a chopping motion, slid past, and fired a shot at the force obs. The knife hand took the opportunity and stabbed toward her shoulder. She screamed as it seemed to bypass her armor and plunged into her shoulder. She grabbed Knife's arm to prevent it from going any further and crushed his forearm. Izuku saw one of the attackers raise their rifle and stop, it confirmed he was a target. The attacker hesitated, but Izuku didn't and slammed his wrench into the man's head. The man wobbled, Izuku went to attack again, but he felt something grab him by the collar and throw him away. He went flying across the room, crashing off the central computer station. Mei and Momo heard him scream. Mei's tears fell, but she didn't stop. Momo handed her the spike devices that Izuku had requested. She heard the footsteps and got to her feet, spinning in time to see one of the soldiers lunge at her in an attempt to wrestle her to the ground. Momo's entire arm glowed as a pump-action shotgun almost exploded into her hand. The fired, and a massive rubber bullet hit the attacker straight in the head, sending him crashing to the floor. Momo wobbled, shook her head to clear her mind, and fired again at the man advancing on Izuku. She missed, the man spun and extended his hand towards her. She felt the gun begin to be yanked from her grasp. She quickly slapped a flashbang coated in adhesive to her weapon and let it fly from her hand. It exploded as it reached the man, he fell back and Izuku dove off the table onto him, striking him with the wrench. As the second wave of attackers came in, the orbs dived in, crashing into them. The orbs deployed capture bolos, tripping up their attackers. One of the attackers fired a black blast from their hand and the part where it hit the orb ceased to be. Momo ran and knocked out one of the attackers that had been tied up. She felt a net fall over her and the electric jolt nearly sent her down. She heard a yell as Izuku tore the thing off of her, throwing it mindlessly at their attackers. A collapsible baton stuck him. Momo heard his ribs break as he fell to the ground. Melissa stumbled back. Her arm was bleeding profusely, another orb threw her around and a knife hand slashed at her leg, sending her down again. Warnings and data flooded her helmet, she turned them off, grabbed the knife hand by the face, and fired. Engaging her rocket boots, she barreled into force orbs, crunching him between herself and the wall. She tried to stumble to her feet when she saw a man not wearing a uniform like the others. Instead, he wore a suit, sunglasses, dark brown hair, and chiseled features. He heard the sound of something powering up and then the man ran forward and kicked her in the head. She was lifted up and back, her helmet nearly ripped from her head. While she was still airborne, the man grabbed her and threw her like a toy into the lab. Momo swept out the legs of the man who had just broken Izuku's ribs and legs out, sending him down. She scrambled to him and placed her hand over him. As a capture grenade fell out, she managed to yank her hand back as it exploded. She could feel her head wobble, but she managed to see the next attack coming. She slid to the side and struck her attacker with a palm thrust to the stomach. As she did so, a combat knife came to her hand and stabbed him. She ripped it to the side, getting to her feet, and a punch landed on her head, sending her stumbling. A kick to the stomach and another punch to the back of her head sent her back down. She couldn't go out. She couldn't. She was an attacker with swords for arms rushing towards Mei, rushing nesting dolls exploding from her body as she scrambled to her feet. The man attacking her stumbled back at the appearance of the dolls, but when he saw Momo get to her feet, they tried to go after her. The dolls popped open and exploded, the din was deafening, and her attacker fell to the ground, being caught in the middle of 5 flashbangs, not moving. Momo stumbled but pushed off into the air, a metal bat springing to her hands. Sword Arms was thrown off, he saw Mei and reared back, ready to run Mei through. Momo screamed as she swung with every ounce of strength she could, the bat colliding with Sword Arm's head, sending him to the floor. She felt a blade rack across her back, but it didn't tear the suit, she just turned and swung, she couldn't see her attacker. They were distorted, but her attack and second attack were true. Mei was talked to the ground, she felt something sharp plunge into her arm, she yelled in pain, rolled with the attack, and brought her knee up as hard as she could. She felt her knee collide with her attacker's groin and a grunt of pain. Her eyes watered as she saw the knife sticking out of her shoulder, she grabbed the dropped screwdriver and drove down through the attacker's eye. Mei scrambled away towards the 2 devices, her arm hanging limply at her side, she fastened the last connection as quickly as possible. Another right hook rocked Momo, she stumbled and managed to block the following, but her counter was deflected and Izuku plunged a jagged piece of metal into her attacker's back. A backhand sent him sprawling. Momo created a metal staff, her go-to weapon, with a quick strike that cracked the man about the head and neck, sending him down. She turned and the blaster was standing in front of her. Hands glowing, "It is over, princess." Momo saw one of her attacker's hands move towards Mei's direction. Melissa dodged the overhand right, she fired a repulsor point blank in the suitman's chest. He didn't move. Instead, she saw his body glow. He punched her, sending her back into a wall, she heard her armor crack. She couldn't dodge the subsequent attacks as she crumpled to the ground. Icarus began to warn her of broken ribs. "So uncivilized," the man said, tossing his destroyed shirt and jacket aside. Momo screamed, swinging her staff and forcing the blast high and away from Mei. She saw the other blaster's hand come up towards her face. Time she slowed down. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Izuku grab the blaster's hand and force it up. Then she saw Izuku's hand disappear, blood sprayed everywhere. Izuku fell to the ground, Momo swung her staff, and the blaster ducked under. Mei yelled, "It's live," she threw the devices, and they tumbled to the middle of the room. Momo spun, bringing her staff under the blaster's chin, lifting them, and covering Izuku with her body. The orbs exploded, and the pins that Momo had created shot up about 5 feet off the ground. A sudden white pulse flooded out in a circle from the devices. Momo watched as all the attackers that were struck wobbled and fell to the ground like puppets whose strings had been cut. She created a tourniquet to staunch the blood pouring from Izuku's hand. Melissa saw the man fall. She saw Momo over Izuku, who was clutching at something with a hand that wasn't there. Mei dragged herself to Izuku, the knife still sticking out of her arm. Then, the enormous device powered up. Izuku, tears in his eyes, sat up and looked at the device. The machine was a large cylinder surrounded by a red field. As it began to whirl to life, Izuku looked around and saw Melissa. Icarus eject Piolid, authorization command code Daedalus. Melissa tumbled free. Icarus, take the device and exit through the shaft, take it 2 miles up and away from any other craft. I understand, the armor closed, the girls watched as it grabbed the divide, his burning could be heard as the metal began to be eaten away. The booster faltered, but Icarus took the device and raced off. They listened to a loud explosion as the building once again rocked overhead. Melissa heard her father shouting her name, and she called back to him seeming that they needed help. Momo pulled Izuku's head into her lap, "Thank you for saving my life," she said. Bandaging the wound as best she could. "Thank you for saving Mei," he responded. Both their eyes closed as they passed out. Mei crawled to a drawer, grabbing a tricorder. She ran it over where Izuku's hand used to be. "He needs help," she staunched the blood loss, "but he needs help," she muttered. She rested her head on his chest and began to cry. Melissa went over to them, wrapped her arms around Mei, and let her own tears fall as the truth of what they had just gone through washed over and through them. David Shield, along with local heroes, some emergency medical staff, and Momo security, rushed to the absolute devastation of the combat zone. He saw his daughter and her friends huddled together, battered, bloody, and devastated. All of them, Melissa pointed to the downed attackers. She and Mei pulled back so the EMTs could get to work. "Please save him," she said as the EMTs grabbed Izuku and got to work. Others went to Mei and Melissa, while Momo's staff attended to her. Thanks for watching guys, that's it for today, so hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget check out our author of this fanfic link and details in description.